Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on back. We are honored to have our guest feature, episode 148 of the Subjective Perspective Show. The one and only, incredible to say, the Beat Generation, the one of the originals, David Amram, with us momentarily. And episode 148 is pretty wild. I mean, I know everything going on with the pandemic is crazy, and no doubt about it, we've been, really sticking tight to the homestead for the most part. So we wish all of you a very safe and healthy holiday season ahead. It's something where I know a lot of people aren't able to travel, and there's a lot going on with that. So no matter what you're doing, please stay safe and just know that's the most important thing. Couple months looks like things will hopefully start to chill out a little bit. And that's why today, uh, December 13th, 2020, uh, we couldn't be any more ecstatic to have one of the great jazz musicians, conductors, uh, writers, uh, who just turned 90 years young. David Amram is somebody who we'll do a little bit of reading about in a bit, as I have his book titled Offbeat, and I'll explain how I got this book. Actually, got it from that young man right here. That's David Amram. This gentleman is Jack Kerouac. So, really cool way that Dave and I met. Now, this all goes back 13 years or so. 13 years we have stayed in touch. I would call Dave from the South Shore of Long Island, sitting at a place called Land's End over in Sayville, New York, and just give him a call. He gave me his number, and we would just talk for an hour, 2 hours. This is somebody who you can see playing music with individuals such as Dizzy Gillespie, the uh, incredible musicianship of uh, the great jazz artists that we revere. And there's one clip we may get to actually where Diz is just laughing and wonder how David Amram is able to play two whistles at the same time. I forget exactly where they were. I want to say it was a tribute to Thelonious Monk, though I could be wrong. So we'll get up into the discussion on that momentarily when Dave gets here. David Amram is one of the kindest people, most insightful people I've ever had the liberty to meet in my life. And last time we had him on was 100 episodes ago. 100 episodes. That was episode 48 back in, gosh, I want to say 2015, 14 or so, 14, 50. I forget which year it was. Been on air since 2013. Goodness gracious, right? You think about it. You've heard my voice. Now we're starting to use a bit more video. You've seen me on a couple videos in the past. Though this is a really special Sunday here over in the Yosemite area, as we have the picture behind us. Got our tree up with some nice lights, and really just want to get into a fascinating and invigorating conversation with David Amram. I refer to him as Dave, and being from New York, I have that force of habit where everything gets shortened, or you get a Y at the end of your name. It could be Bobby, Paulie, right? The whole situation. And I've had friends that were Davids, and I would all the kids in the neighborhood said Dave. So that's why it's such a uh, uh, natural flow of thought for me. So just know whenever uh, the great David Amram gets here, we have a lot to get into. 100 episodes, so we have a lot's going on since the last couple years, and it's something where, and I'm actually going to double check my Zoom piece. Cool. Okay, we're all set on our side and making sure my Ethernet cable is all situated. Want to get the best Wi-Fi, obviously, so we can have a nice streamless uh, video piece. Now, I'm going to read a piece actually from Offbeat, and I'll talk to Dave in a bit, uh, uh, reminding him of how I had met him back in '07. It was. But just a great book. And to learn the nuances of these conversations between these incredible artists, poets, musicians, it's absolutely incredible stuff. And as I get into page 135, uh, I'm going to also mention that you'll hear names such as Gregory Corso, Neil Cassidy, Gary Schneider, and so when you hear these names, just know these are all part of a generation of people that, in hindsight, essentially uh, looking back during that time period, were given that name, the title, the Beat Generation. So, for anybody who has never heard of the Beat Generation, I'll put it to you like this: free flowing ideas could be even in the form of music, such as hip hop music or jazz music, spontaneous thoughts that become, whether it's words, sounds produced by an instrument, uh, they were like some of the original modern, people that were able to do that. Uh, so I always equate it to great hip hop artists that I used to really enjoy growing up, such as Rakim, Chuck D, people nowadays from Immortal Technique to, the list goes on. There's so many. Solo Redline out in Chicago, who we've had on the show. Uh, Wonderful, incredibly brilliant individual, talented artist. And been drinking a lot of sparkling water actually, because the sparkling water, goodness gracious, a year ago, realized that the blood sugar was too high. So I cut out all of the drinks that would have sugar in them, and thought to myself, well, what could I find that is a healthy alternative? These sparkling waters were coming out. There's a whole bunch of them. So we're into that nowadays. And listen, what I want to do is, before actually I go into, I want to the read, I want to message Dave really quickly. Boom. And 2 seconds. And I'm just sending a message from earlier. So don't mind me right now as I'm on my little device here. Okay. 2 seconds. So right now I'm trying to type as I get into a, a thought process. So thank you for allowing me to get into that piece. Um, Almost done. Almost there. And I'm going to quickly resend the link. Boom. And let me trying to figure it out on my side. Okay. Oh, here's Dave. Okay, everybody. We are honored to have the one and only. Hey there, fine sir.
Sorry, I'm a little late. I was now. Should I use my microphone?
You sound great. David, you look
I,
great. You
I
sound
got a,
great.
I have a microphone too. See
Hey,
if this is better.
cool.
Oh, sorry, I'm a little late.
No, not at all. I was actually just in the midst of messaging you in case you need me to
Okay,
resend you the
is
link.
this better?
That sounds excellent.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's excellent.
One question, Nick. First of all, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful.
You
Dave,
look
I'm
terrific.
blessed.
You
I'm
look about 10
blessed.
years younger than when I met you, man. So you look,
Likewise,
now
man, you look great, brother.
let me ask you one question. Are they going to film this too?
This is being recorded right now.
Okay, good.
And so I'm going to put this up on our sites. I'm going to send you the recording. You're going to have it all so you can put it up. And I want to get
Oh,
into an awesome conversation, man.
no,
It's
just
been a
one.
while. A second.
If you need to see the microphone and all this, I could do it either way, or I could do it without the mic. Whatever's best for you.
That looks so cool. Honestly, I love it.
I'm just
Yeah,
getting.
I love those pictures. I'm looking
Wait,
at those
okay,
pictures.
let me get this set up. I
Yeah,
have to
take your
sit.
time. No rush. Oh, yeah. That's
That,
right. There he is. I'm
now,
lucky to know you,
all right,
Dave.
let me
I'm
see.
lucky, brother.
I got this other light. I've got to. Oh shit!
Cool.
Wait a minute. I have to be careful. I don't
Yeah, take your time.
break everything.
That's what I was doing over here just now, man. Just before I was getting everything set up. I know I got wires running right now. No one can see it.
Yeah,
Oh, great pictures. Yeah, I'm
I
looking
think
at some
that's. Yeah,
shots.
I think that's okay. Just a minute. Now, how's that?
Hey, that's perfect. Dave, that picture behind you, where you're playing one of the flutes, is that
Yeah,
from the concert when you played with Dizzy Gillespie and played the two flutes?
yeah. That's one with Monk, the one up there that you see up behind where my finger's
Yes.
pointing. That's one I did with Thelonious fourth Thelonious Monk in Brooklyn with a bunch of great musicians.
I actually have a video of you with Dizzy Gillespie. Dizzy Gillespie is just like laughing because he can't believe what you're doing with those two flutes. He's
Yeah,
just
that was
like,
fun.
come on, man. Dave, listen, you know, so much is you know what's really cool? It's been 100 episodes since you were on last.
Isn't that amazing?
That's crazy. That's crazy, man. Because you were on episode 48 back in like 2015 or so. And
Yeah.
I was like, I told Lisa, my wife, I was like, uh, I wonder how long it's been. It'd be crazy if it's like a round number, 100 episodes, 148. I was like, this is meant to be. Dave, I want to remind you from my perspective how I first met you and let the audience know because I was going to read a page from Offbeat,
Oh,
and I was going to mention how I got this actually. Got this from your hands, and I also got, I don't want to mess the page up. uh, a super cool performer card, which is your card, number two, at Bradstock in
Oh,
Long
really?
Island, New York. And just so a cool refresher for everybody. From my perspective, I was going there. I was in a band. Uh, 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 Nice fella from my old high school, really good lead guitarist. He was like, "Hey, man, David Amram is going to be up here. You got to come on up." And I was over at my family's house in Blue Point, which they've recently sold and moved to Pennsylvania, I believe you know a bit about. And but they're up in the northern part of PA, Scrantonish area. Um, and so I was going down to Bradstock from Blue Point to Sayville down Montauk Highway, and it's packed. You know, big festival for that region of the island, and a super cool one too. Especially when David Amram is headlining. So I got there and I was literally, I did not realize how much it was going to cost. So I told the first guy at the door, I said, "Listen, is there any at the like one of the first bouncers at the not the door, but running the tickets?" I said, "Hey, is there any way I can get in? I literally don't have any money, but I really want to see David Amram. I mean, I've read about him, and Dave, this is before the internet was hopping, so I never saw a picture of you, a recent picture. I think there was one silhouette of a in a magazine I had seen of you, so I didn't really know what you looked like at that point." Uh, but and I also wanted to go see my buddy and like just I was younger and I was like, oh, this is gonna be a fun time. So he said no, the first guy. I was like, okay. So the second bouncer, there was another side entrance, sort of by like where the boat entrance is into the creek or the going into the bay. And I said, hey, listen, I'm with the Riverdale Press, Riverdale Bronx. I'm with the Riverdale Press. I'm doing a piece on David Amram. Is there any way I could get in? And he just called me out on it. He's like, get out of here. I know you are not. There's no way. I was like, I know. So then I was like, oh gosh, what am I gonna do? And I saw there was a fence at the end. Maybe I could walk around it. Probably still they would have saw me. So I'm walking and I see a gentleman in a super cool, like, uh, hat, sort of cowboyish hat. Not so much like a was it a 20-gallon cap, but just a really cool like piece. And talking to a couple other people about politics, right? So I uh, I say I'm walking to try to get into this thing to try to hopefully watch you perform and get into this conversation with these three fellas. Two of the fellas end up going after like a half hour, and the fella with the hat extends his hand and says, "Hey, listen, uh, you know, my name's David Amram. What's your name?" I said, "I said my name's Nick DeJosia." I said, "It's a pleasure to meet you." And we got to talking, and you were going to your son's wedding, I believe it was out east that day. So you said, Nick, I want you to come by my car for a second, uh, after talking for a bit, and you handed me this. And I was, I mean, I read this thing right away, and I was like blown away. I was like, this is amazing. Then I said to you, being a young buck, I still couldn't get into the place. I said, Dave, is there any way you can help me out? Get me in, man. And you put your arm around me, brother, and you walked me right past the gentleman. He was just doing his job, so he was a nice guy, but he wouldn't let me in. And as you got your arm around me, we're walking by. I look at him. He's in disbelief. He's like, that kid was for real. But it really totally worked out different. And you put that card, the pass, your number two pass as a performer to Bradstock at Bradstock,
All right.
and you put it in my shirt pocket and you gave me a £1. You brought me and you said, stay in touch, man. And I said, I will. Being so young and just reading about you all, it was so surreal, and I was so lucky So I just want to refresh the audience's memory, and if you may have forgotten since I've told you last, uh, what an honor, man. And we've talked many times since, and a lot has gone on since 2015. First off, happy birthday as well. Happy
Thank you.
belated.
Well, the guy who played drums with me, Kevin Twigg, was from Bayport, and
Yes.
he was younger than when I met you. I think he was maybe about he was actually probably he was I think 17, 16. He was just finishing high school, and he came over carrying his dad had a clam boat, and he
Yeah,
came
that's
over
right.
and we were playing a benefit at the church in Davis Park,
Yeah.
and playing a fundraiser for them. And Elvin Jones came, and John Coltrane's drummer, because the regular drummer couldn't come. And this kid walks up with the xylophone, little wooden xylophone, said, "Can I sit in with you guys?" So I said, "Sure, man. What are you going to play that?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Great." So man, he could really play. And Elvin said, "Hey, kid, you sound pretty good." And Elvin was talking to him and encouraging him. So then he said, when he went back to school, and his high school instructor said, "Nobody listens to jazz or classical music. No one, you're wasting your time. You'll never get a job. You can't do it. You have no talent. There's no market for it. Give it up. Forget about it." He said, "Well, if Elvin Jones liked what I did, I guess I must be on the right track." And
I
he ended
like
up going to
that.
Manhattan School. He's a great, can play symphony players and write symphonies. And we're still playing together. And everything that I ever did was because people, when I was just a kid and even younger person, gave me a helping hand, you know, not because I thought I deserved it. And I wondered really why that ever happened. Then I realized, well, essentially they could see I was eager, and that's the way they had been able to get into what they were doing. And it was the tacit understanding that it's your responsibility, if you live long enough to become an older person yourself, you're supposed to do the same thing. That's how you pay your tuition for what was bequeathed upon you for free.
Mm.
And you can't pay the tuition to the people who are no longer there or expired or who never charged you in the first place. You're supposed to pass some of that on. And you're not doing the world a great favor being a great liberal progressive hero by doing that. It's just common sense.
Hmm.
And it makes life much more fun. So you can.
Yeah,
And I
I
just spoke to
agree.
Sonny Rollins yesterday, who's 2 months older than me. And he said, "No, man,"
Hey.
he said, "it's not about self, me. He said, "That doesn't bring you any satisfaction." He said, "You're supposed to give." He said, "That's
Hmm.
what makes you gives you the satisfaction." He said that in the
Hmm.
golden rule. I said, "Wow." And he's 90. He's 92 months before me. And I met him in 1955 when I was playing with Mingus. And I was just a big hayseed in New York.
Whew.
He was
Dave,
so
Dave,
brilliant.
your
And
camera.
he
Can
was
you
that kind
put
of
your
guy I
camera
met.
down? Can you put your
Oh yeah.
camera down a little bit? Because that
Oh,
now I
there we
see
go.
you way better. Thank
Okay.
you. Handsome gentleman.
I was so much into philosophy, I forgot reality. Excuse me.
Hey, I was listening to your philosophy and I was digging it. And I didn't mean to cut you off. I
No, no.
apologize. You mentioning Mingus.
Well, since it's your show, you have a First Amendment right to say something too.
Hey, I'll say this. Thank you for being here on this blessed Sunday. I mean, it's a holy Sunday right here, and take it metaphorically in terms of how we can start to bridge so many different worlds with wisdom from those who have it, who have come before us, who have seen it, who have lived it, such as you, sir, and Dave, man. So, really, Davis Park. I'm just going to take it from Davis Park. So, Davis Park's cool. I used to work there 14 years young. Okay. So, this is what I used to do. Growing up in Blue Point, working class family, father a carpet installer, still installing carpets up in PA now in his late 60s, and doing it since he's 18. and I had some buddies. Give a big shout out to if you ever go to a pizza place, Dave, in Bayport called Satellite Pizza. My old buddy Marcus owns it, and we used to go out on his boat because he had a boat, right? And my old buddy Adam and all the old crew, the kids that were it was like Lord of the Flies. We would just run around Davis Park. We would take a 9 foot a Zodiac raft with a little like 8 horsepower engine on it, following the ferry that would go
Mm.
from Davis Park, from Patchogue to Davis Park, because the wake of the ferry would make the middle of the bay less choppy because it could get really choppy. And when you're on a little raft, it's like you're going up like 2 feet and coming down. I actually hurt my tailbone like that for a bit. And so I used to work at Davis Park actually at the snack bar, which was on the corner, the burger place on the corner
Right.
right there. In probably 92 or so, Dave. So I used to surf there. I was just a kid, working class kid from the working class streets of that region. Family both family coming from southern Italy. My parents born here, and I believe my grandma might have been born here also, but some of her brothers born in Italy. Barry and my other side, my mom's side in Calabria.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
so
body. I've been
being
there.
able to jump on the water and go to Davis Park, oh my gosh! So what got you to Davis Park?
Well, it's still there. And in body, instead of saying andiamo, let's get going, they say shamanin. I was there. Everybody said shaman. I said, what's that? They said, you know, sono molto contento di essere qui. I'm very happy to be here. They said, now it's time to split. You just say shamanin. And I remember being in body and Altamura, that's right outside of Barry. Oh, man. For people that aren't familiar, if you ever get a chance, Rome, incredible. Milano, fantastic. Napoli, but go to Bari and
Mm,
Barres, where they speak
the
Barres.
Bades, that is right, the Bades.
And I can't pronounce it, not Montaduro. It's the town closer there where they make the most fantastic wine
Oh,
in the world.
yeah, I had my family make their own wine. My great grandparents make their wine, and uncles, and yep, yep.
And so it's so beautiful. And then you realize, of course, there's 100 different ways to speak Italian. And they're all correct because that's the representative of each of the little places that has its own history. And it's that way in the United States. All the different ways we would say hello, we'd say in proper English, hello, it's so nice to meet you, and or what's up, or how y'all doing. Those are all correct because they represent something cultural. When I worked with Jack Kerouac, he used to really get a lot of static because he would speak French in the Quebecois style that his folks were brought up as saying, Je suis bien content d'être ici. I'm very happy to be here. Je suis bien content d'être ici. Or je
Hmm,
parle français couramment. I speak French fluently. Je parle français couramment. That's
hmm,
Canadian or certain part of Canada, but they're both correct because those represent different ways of speaking, which are like music, unwritten history of what people have been through. And that's a heavy thing
mm,
to the extent that we all want to learn King's English and all that stuff. But all the so-called dialects are also beautiful and worthy of study. And
mhm,
music teaches you that. And
mm.
then when you understand that, you can respect people a lot more and be more in tune with them. So when Jack would speak his French, and I would use my Philadelphia Sephardic Jewish Polish accent of French, literary snobs hearing us talking, especially before his books came out, he got famous. Then they really were resentful the way because he was so for real. But anyway,
Mm.
just hearing two guys rapping in the language of supposed intellectuals was offensive to them. So I only mention that because so many beautiful places, including in the United States and where you come from in Blue Point. I remember I knew the Miller family. Remember they had 9 kids
Oh,
that all lived.
oh, goodness gracious! I think uh, I don't want to rattle people's names off, but I do know a Miller family very well. Actually, my father knows probably one of the children of the Millers that you would
Yeah,
know, uh, and wonderful people. And if it's the same Millers that I'm thinking of.
and 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 from your hometown, I know. Well, that's Blue Point. That I remember 1950s, and they used to still have Bayman and had the few oyster boats. There weren't any more oysters hardly, but they still had
Yep.
the Bayman and the oyster boats. And when we first came to Davis Park, there was no electricity, and they had places where the squatters went, Skunk Hollow,
Yay.
and all kinds of amazing stuff and amazing people and great history and a certain beauty that's just as extraordinary. And all over the country, even in New York City, you can find in big places where you guys are in California, as they say in New Jersey, forget about it.
That's right.
It's so beautiful. And I know now are married and have a family and everything up
Yes,
there.
Dave. So
And you're
pretty
teaching
much,
college, teaching school. That's
yes,
wonderful.
yes,
And
Dave. So
writing up a storm.
and writing up a storm, writing music. I just defended my dissertation and earned my doctorate of education from the University of New England in
Wow.
Biddeford, Maine, and a wonderful group of people, wonderful program, and it's in transformative educational leadership. And Dave, I sent you the video that I did in Monterey County of the talk I had given, and everybody that's watching this can go to beawoke.com, go to the public speaking section, and you'll see the video there. It's also on our YouTube page. Oh no, actually not on our YouTube page because I have it just on the talks page. It's the MCAET talk, McCate Talks, Monterey County Arts and Education, I believe it is. And we were in the studio, and I had a brilliant student who had seen me, approached me, and he was like, "Hey, listen, I want to focus on you for one of the talks we do," because he was actually doing work over at the studio. And I was blown away, Dave. Really, when I met you, I was okay. You want to hear what I was doing? '07, I believe that was. I was going to work in Harlem, 2 blocks from the Apollo.
Mm.
Okay, 125th in Madison, over at a charter school over there, and I was it was all brand new to me. I was sort of a new teacher, just 2 years in. So from then, it's been gosh, about 13 years, 2021, 14 years almost since I met you when I started teaching. And uh, I taught in the New York City public school system for about 8 years, and then made my way with my girlfriend at the time, who becomes my wife about 2.5 years ago. It's actually our 12th year anniversary meeting in 3 days. And we drive across America. Now, listen, I couldn't have done this without the spirit of all of you and your friends and people that I had read about, and that, as I have talked to you, who I know that I could do this, I can make this happen. Drove across, no place to live, pretty much as they've said, as I heard Jack Kerouac make the point, you know, he did what he did because it was sort of like an act of desperation. He wrote the way he had to write because he had to do it, and it was like it was an act of desperation. I had a the economy was getting a little wild after 2008 with the subprime mortgage lending aspect, and prices were high. So we decided to throw our life to fate, drove across 80, ended up in a little town called Moss Landing, just outside of Salinas and Watsonville, ended up getting into a college there, one or two classes, which ended up they needed a couple other classes filled. I was like, I'll take those. We rented a bedroom in a trailer, a little modular, for about 6 months until we can get an apartment. And now we have a three-bedroom house out here near Yosemite, a career that I am in love with. I love what I do, Dave, and it's because of people like you, people that have inspired me, that allowed me to say to myself, I could do it too. My family, the love they instilled, the work ethic as that working class South Shore Long Island uh, uh, culture was putting out within our neighborhoods, really work at an early age, and respect your uh, those that are there in front of you, no matter who it is. You give respect, and I think that's something that we got to keep on keeping on. And they told me to dream, and they told me to play music. My dad played the drums, my mom played the accordion, so we would have a little hoot. We would have a little jam session often. I had two younger brothers, a younger sister, and we would all be banging on something in our little house in Blue Point that my parents bought for about $20,000 back in the '70s. Sold it for over 400.
Mm.
Different time.
Well, one thing is too good for your listeners to know that when you talk about the work ethic and respect, and those are the things that all of us, especially and those of us that haven't expired yet, still have that, which is respect for everybody, anybody, and everybody, and putting in a good day's work. And in the case of my own kids, because when we lived on the farm, I was brought up on a farm. Even though I was working in music, they saw me out there busting my chops every day doing the farm work and getting them to do some. They got into that to the extent that when they became city billies, they still maintained that work ethic and that respect for other people, not just for animals, for nature, but for other people and for themselves. And they're nice with younger people and when they're great with kids, because that's the way I was brought up and the way they were brought up. And the whole idea of the so-called beat generation, that was a whole big franchising branding. Jack Kerouac's book was so successful that suddenly they had to justify, talk about a working class background of a guy who came from Lowell, Massachusetts, wearing a check shirt like a Canadian lumberjack, 35 years old, flat broke, suddenly became Mr. Big overnight, which was the last thing he was ever interested in. And he also was a devout Catholic, went to church, studied Buddhism, loved and lived with his mother because he promised his father on his father's deathbed he would look after his mother since she looked after Jack her whole life.
Mm,
And he was very patriotic because he was appreciated being in this amazing, beautiful, crazy country of ours.
mm,
So therefore, the Eastern Seaboard establishment of the 50s of people who thought they were low lifes because they weren't English 19th century lords and ladies and were in Buckingham Palace felt that they were they felt they were basically trash with better clothes. So
mm.
they were insecure themselves. So when they saw somebody who was just like a regular person, which every human being so far is that we've until they discover Bigfoot and an alien from outer space,
Yeah, I
we're all
agree.
pretty
I
much
concur.
the same species. You know, he was suddenly a traitor to his newfound class, which he never wanted to be in the first place. And I only mention that because the so-called beat stuff. That's why I wrote that book, Offbeat, collaborating with Kerouac, because I
Yeah.
tried to show him just as a human being and a person. And I never glamorized his drinking himself to death because that was a drag and that was a plague, just like heroin and everything else that kills people. It becomes part of a culture,
Mm.
and that's accepted to the same extent that it's rejected. It's accepted by those who feel that basically the arts are worthless anyway, and anybody who wants to participate in them is worthless. So if they die in a gutter, miserable, stoned out, on a wreck, that's all they deserve. I don't mean to bum you out, but
No.
that was the I never could understand that of the live fast and die young. And you're not an authentic artist if you're not a miserable, infantile, dependent personality, stoned out loser, totally.
Hmm.
And then I understood the reason why that is, because basically those who would like to make those judgments and put people in their place, which we only place we have is being on earth,
Mm.
you know, for a while, it, they would assume that because you dare to go into the arts, that's all you deserve. And people forget when they say, well, I better shoot up some smack so I can play like Charlie Parker. He practiced 14 hours a day.
Hmm.
And we don't admire Ulysses Grant today because he was an alcoholic. We don't admire Abraham Lincoln because he was a melancholic. And we don't admire Sigmund Freud because he was a coke addict.
Hmm.
We admire them for their work, not for their bad habits.
Mm.
And I only say that because the one thing, to my amazement and gratification, I found was that even, knowing Charlie Parker, Dizzy and Monk and all those great people, when I was in their presence, those that Dizzy didn't, but the others who used most everyone who used hard drugs were stuck in that for one reason or another, but they didn't recommend it. And they never said, this is why I play the way, or this is why I am the way I am.
Yeah.
And in the 50s, of course, it was a drinking culture. Basically, so much stuff took place in bars, but that was like the Irish tradition, or a lot of English or France, or a lot of
Yeah.
places in Europe where
Yeah.
people go to pubs or bars to hang out and would go with their children. It wasn't to see who could drink the most alcohol in 3 hours,
Yeah.
or how you could
Exactly.
hold your liquor, or you
Yeah.
could beat up somebody else. It was a different thing. And
Totally.
drinking was sociable. And all these things now that have become a plague, I can understand why there's so many people are so shocked that there's a drug epidemic. Well, if our society glamorizes getting stoned out of your head as being groovy,
Hmm.
it's understandable that people can be brainwashed into that. And if we
Exactly.
could just all learn to care for ourselves and our
Yes.
heritage and our parents and grandparents and each other,
Yes.
then we wouldn't need to get stoned out of our head every second in
Hmm.
order to feel either we were worthy or we were escaping what we have to be, which
Yeah.
is lost.
100%. And Dave, did you? And I'm just gonna say to the audience, we had David Amram on episode 48, the Subjective Perspective show. So I asked Dave a lot of questions in that. So I'm not gonna revisit all those, Dave. All right. So I'm just gonna just we're just gonna wrap right now, have a good time, do what we're doing. I got a lot of questions though. So please check that out also because it's an amazing episode where David Amram is rummaging through his house for like 2.5 hours, finally finds the eulogy, the poem he wrote for Hunter S. Thompson at his, uh, was it the, where did you write? Where did you read that? I
Well, actually,
apologize.
I wrote that one when he was still alive. They had a big party for him in Louisville, his hometown, celebrating Hunter S. Thompson. And so I wrote a poem when I was done that called Kentucky Southern Gentleman.
That's right.
And I only mentioned this. I wanted to say to you readers, I'm not trying to sound like Mr. Rogers because I did everything and I never thought I'd live to be 30. But then I realized,
You can sound
hey,
however you want,
but
brother.
actually,
You are the
when I had
man.
my first child, I was already 48, I guess. Yeah, she was born in 1979. So I was about to turn 49, and I saw this beautiful little baby. I said, "Man, I better cool out so I can be around when she's there, not be in a mental institution or the cemetery." And then the second daughter came, and she was like so gorgeous. I said, "Wow, I got it." And then I had a son, Adam. And I said, "Well, boy, I want to play ball with him when, as my dad did with me, and we get our little farm do some farm work together and play some music together if he
That's right.
decides. I said, I better be around. So that was my immediate 12-step program without having to join anything.
Hey.
Just seemed that now it was time for me to grow up and I had a responsibility to the kids. So that was a big, big, big help. But I saw so many people before that just throw their lives down the drain. After about the 200th friend died, I figured maybe that stuff ain't good for you after all. I
Hmm.
decided to leave. So when I go to colleges and schools and they say, oh, you know, Jack Kerouac, Dizzy Gillespie, and Charlie Parker, and all these Hunter S. Thompson, all these crazy people. So they bring out a whole big tray with $2,000 worth of choice drugs on it. I say, listen, I appreciate your hospitality, really, but I I don't do any of that stuff anymore. But I said, if it, I I'm not saying that to be holier than now. I'm just living proof
Yeah,
that you can be just as crashing a bore,
that's right.
stoned, cold, sober as you are stoned out of your head.
That's right.
So you have a good time, but I just rather say no. And that's
Yeah,
the one thing
that's
I
right.
shocked all my
I
fellow
concur with that. I concur with that
lovely,
statement.
loving
No
friends of
doubt.
saying that I love Nancy Reagan. What? She was. I said, no, wait a minute. Her answer to all the problems were, just say no. And I said, well, regardless of politics, that's the truth for a lot of the stuff we have that, and essentially a lot of the drug culture and the violence and freakatissimoville is jammed down our throats constantly
Yep.
in advertising and television commercials and
Yep.
everything, to the point where you figure you got to be get down with it, get down, be hip, cool, and attractive. And now, of course, they've tried to legitimize that by taking it out of the illegal drug market and selling things that are supposed to be good for you. And then you read the fine print in the commercials, which go by very quickly because they're forced to do that by the health department, saying, however, this might make you blind, give you cancer or a heart attack. You say, wait a minute,
Yep.
is it worth your life to supposedly get groovy by buying something? And that extends to the whole consumer culture. And I asked someone in advertising, I said, man, I said, all the wizards I know that got so much talent and work for advertising agencies, advertising and brainwashing people into buying all this garbage. Um, what would happen if we just decided, well, let's let the garbage man take the garbage and hopefully find a way, maybe to recycle it in a healthy way.
Yeah,
But what would happen if we just had stuff that was really good for you?
that's
He said,
right.
well, that'd be easier for us. He said,
Yeah.
we could sell anything. That's why we're in advertising. We could take the worst crap, pardon my language, folks, the worst crap and make it look beautiful.
Yep.
That's our job. So if we have something that we love and know is healthy, we could really do a good job. So I
Yeah,
said, oh, isn't that interesting? So therefore, if people could appreciate the beauty that surrounds us, the way I know you and the beautiful notes you wrote to me, how beautiful it is there. And it is everywhere if you really look
yes,
at the sky and listen to a bird or
that's
see
right.
one tree or see a face of somebody smiling, or even sitting in the subway, just see something nice going by, or a person reading a paper, or their shoes they're wearing, something that you can relate to. Everybody would really be a lot happier. And if they didn't dislike themselves, none of us would buy 90% of the junk that we buy, because the junk that we buy is sold to us in a way where we feel maybe if we wear that, if we eat that, if we drink that, if we look that way, if we think that way, we'll be less disgusting.
Hmm.
So when you suddenly don't want to allow your mind to be colonized like that wonderful part in The Godfather 2 where they show Don Corleone as a little boy showing up and nobody comes to pick him up, and they have a tag around his neck like a dog, and
Mm.
he's sitting there for 2 days with that little tag around his neck. The brilliance in that movie was showing, well, that's why one of the reasons why he became the way he was, because he figured that's what it is here, and
Yeah.
that's all society thinks I am or I'm ever going to be.
Yes.
That was a pretty heavy shot,
Mm.
and the director was smart enough to linger on that, showing the poor little boy being treated like a dog. So the beautiful thing we have on our Statue of Liberty, and I wish they could Xerox that and give it to people of all political persuasions. That beautiful, beautiful sentence that's put there of the Lady Liberty as we come into these shores to be welcomed, the way the Indian people welcomed us, we are welcomed now and can welcome other people. You know, all that good feeling that makes this such a amazing, still an incredibly beautiful country.
Yes.
If we could, restore some of that feeling,
Mm.
that would be make people a lot happier too.
I.
So I guess all we
That's
can
right.
do in the arts and in life and with our kids and in our everyday living is to try to, get some of that appreciation for others, but also for ourselves. And
Yes.
as that's the best way to clean up your act. The
Yes.
only problem, Nick, is that if that would happen, the entire consumer culture would collapse and we'd have to start all over again and only sell some really good stuff. And the reason I know that that shows that what
Yeah.
we call capitalism is just a word, really. Doing something of value is works is because when I was in New Orleans, I went to the funkiest places because I was there a lot with musicians would go where it was really inexpensive and it was unbelievably delicious. I said, man, how can these places have such great cooking? The guy said to me, man, he said, they better. They'd be out of business in 2 weeks. I said, really?
Mm.
Why? He said, because everybody here knows how to cook at home real good. And that, of course, explained it. So when we know what's worthwhile, the society, including the business world, can accommodate what we know. So
Yeah.
I think
And
our
that's
job
yeah.
is
No.
to
It.
present something beautiful. And your radio show is terrific because you don't have sponsors to say, okay, let's skip all that nice stuff. Tell us about car wrecks, fires, murders,
Yeah.
rape, and arson. And
Ah.
I know that's entertaining, and I'm not against capitalism or people having a good time, whatever it is. But there's some other stuff besides that that's even more interesting. And I guess the way to present that is not by putting it in a bottle of formaldehyde or in a big museum with a guard with a club, making you feel like you're visiting Attica prison, which I've done. That's pretty rugged, serious, whatever
Mm.
you think you are or you've got to offer.
Interesting. I want to hear
It's
about
not
that.
Mr. Rogers' neighborhood remotely.
Yeah, that's crazy. I
It's
want to hear about that later. That's
you got to
crazy.
bring good feelings with you because it's rough.
Yeah.
But
100%.
we don't have to be incarcerated in ourselves to think that we only have things of beauty have to be put in prison and take art, music, poetry, dance, sports, and put them all in either a mausoleum or a maximum security prison. We could present those with a big welcome mat.
And you
That's
know,
what I try to do.
and that's what you do. Dave, you are, I mean, just listening to you and everything that you're saying, uh, it, it's okay. So not only is it the way that, the paradigm should be in terms of loving one another, in terms of respecting one another. And that's something that we can really create. That's not something I think that's just hyperbole. I think that as consciousness grows, now listen, social media is a wild thing. The media is wild, as you make the point. And it's really up to the community as a total, to, in essence, look out for one another. Be a positive force, and that starts where? Childhood. So we have to be good to our children. That's number one. Be good to the kids, right? Teach them how to respect one another, to have a universal love for life, for the other kids they see, uh, and as a community we can come together and be positive voices, whether it's at the bus stop, whether it's in the pizza place, wherever it is. We could be those positive people. And back in the 50s, and just to super quickly go to you know when all of the music was going on in the coffee houses in the 40s and 50s, when you were jamming with all of these incredible people, there was a reaction to society happening, which came to prominence, I believe, in On the Road, uh, with sort of the questioning of authority, questioning maybe the conservatism of the time period. Uh, do you see any similarities today between
Absolutely.
what is what do you
And
think about everything going on?
I don't mean to be shocking. It's always been that way. And there's always been, and I think without being disappointing to anyone, I loved every second of my life. And during that time, especially boy, the 50s were a drag for largely.
Yes.
And the part that wasn't a drag were those people who understood and often were victimized by a lot of stuff that they had no control over because racism, sexism, all those isms, narrow mindedness ism, colonization of thinking that you suck because you're an ethnic person. That's Floyd Red Westerman, the great Sioux Lakota singer, said, Dave, you have to understand. He said, the white man's term ethnic means subhuman. So therefore, everybody, everybody was some sort of a subhuman. And one of the famous politicians, when he felt that people of color disagreed with him, his response, the famous mantra, believe it or not, was send them all back to Africa. Well, that idea was we were all supposed to be sent back to Africa. So we didn't come from there, but most of the people who were spokespeople for that point of view didn't know where Poland, Italy, Greece, Ireland were located. So the idea was just if you don't like it, ship them all out
Mm.
and find someone else who can come in and work cheaper. That that's been going on for a long time. But then there's a whole other side of the culture that's always been here, always been. Ralph Ellison, great writer, had been a jazz musician, and he said one of the reasons why he entitled his great book "The Invisible Man" was because well-meaning people of the Caucasian persuasion, intellectual, high-toned leaders of society, felt guilty because of the mistreatment of people of color. So the best thing to assuage their feelings was to pretend it never happened and there was no people there at all. Therefore, people of color were considered to be invisible, like the invisible, that whole idea of the invisible man. Pete Seeger told me, really shocking, that his forebearers came over on the Mayflower. I said, what?
Wow.
It was the guy that was supposed to be Mr. Left Wing, going down and helping out the miners and helping out all the people in the world that were struggling. There he was, an authentic Boston Brahmin, blue blood Mayflower descendant.
Wow.
It gave me more the impression that he was Mr. Funkatissimo. He was actually both because he was very reserved and Brahmin in his personal life and very proud and private. And if you said, I really like you or I like your music, he couldn't stand it. you were getting too personal. But if you said
Yeah.
your horse was sick or you had a flat tire or someone was in jail, then he'd get real excited. He was just a natural born activist. But he said, the Indian people treated us when we came over with respect, welcomed us. They didn't say, where do you come from? How much money did your parents make? How do you pray? They were just welcomed. That first spring, after they helped us to get through the winter, they showed us how to plant crops, how to survive. And he said, what we did to them was disgraceful and unforgivable. But then he really blew my mind because he said, however, feeling guilty is a waste of time and a self indulgence.
Hmm.
But saying thank you and possibly trying to do a little tiny something in some way whenever you can, and to treat other people who are showing up as we did from a desperate situation and show them the same hospitality that was
Hmm.
extended to us is a very
Mm,
important thing. And
mm.
he also said, remember, think globally, but act locally. So when you said the word community, that was a magic thing. And we're all trained, especially in the arts or music or anything, got to hit the big time, be a big winner's crap on everybody and stomp on the losers and get to the top of the heap and dump on everybody. And then you'll be a real human and a big success. And don't let anybody grab your spot, dump on them and push them off all. I respect hard work and ambition and struggling and all that. Good Lord, I've been doing that all my life. But that's not really the idea, and it's not very satisfying. And you see people who are devout followers of the full greed ahead syndrome, and when they get older, they don't look so hot,
Hmm.
and they're a drag to be with, a drag, and their misery extends to the point where as soon as you say hello, you feel your stomach turn into a knot.
Oh,
So
oh,
the other
I
way,
I know how that could be. Oh, yeah.
so
Oh,
so you figure you have to leave. You got to leave things to the experts. So that's an overcrowded field, a non-growth industry, and the experts got that sewed up. So
hmm.
it's better to hang out with other people who feel differently, and there's a lot of them, and they're all fun to be with, and they can also teach you good lessons and help you to clean up your own act each day.
Mm.
Then, when you feel an attack of swinishness, narcissistic greed coming on, you can quell it.
What do you think about this? I love it. I love it. Exactly. And oh, hey, big shout out first off to George Walker, Merry Prankster. Had the honor of doing a tour with George, 2019, and George was saying the nicest things about you. And one thing he said, I got to tell Dave once. I told David once, if I could come back as anybody, I'd want to come back as him. I said, that's cool, man. That's cool. I was like, Dave's the man. And a big shout out to Brian Hassett, who I believe you have done some cool pieces with. I actually have Brian's book back there. Uh, Escaping my memory right now. Uh, uh, Ravaged, Blissfully Ravaged in Democracy. Awesome book. Outstanding book. But wanted to shout them out. Dave, did you ever know, like, did you get to talk to Jack Kerouac, like, in the 60s? Or, because I was curious, because he, October 21st, 1969, he passes away. Woodstock happened just before then. I always wondered, did you know what he thought about that by any chance?
Well, I think he loved Bach, as we know, and the classics. He loved the classic European writers. He loved Lao Tse and he loved all the beautiful musics and literature and paintings of the world and languages and people. And I think he felt, as a lot of us did, that the entertainment industry that became a $1 billion industry kind of took over the culture, and jazz and classical music were supposed to follow the famous mantra, don't trust anybody over 30. And that the
Hmm.
whole idea of establishing an official youth culture, when I do the piece, the wonderful piece that Louis Armstrong really kind of put on the map. It's a wonderful world.
I have that.
I
I'm
was
gonna
sitting. I was tell
show
folks
that
I was
later.
sitting with Richie Havens, Jack, and myself before Woodstock in 1967,
All
which
right.
was called officially the Summer of Love. And
Monterey Pop Fest.
Richie said, "Man," he said, "I've been." He said, "I've been brought up in Brooklyn in neighborhoods where we all hung out with everybody from all over the world because that's the way our block was."
Yeah.
And he said, we all appreciated each other, but I never knew there was an official summer of love. And he said, now that there's not supposed to be um, hip, the beat generation, so called, whatever that was supposed to be, isn't now official. People, instead of having on their paste on goatees, horn rimmed glasses with no lenses inside, carrying bongos with price tags on them and Albert Camus books that they didn't read. Instead of that, they're trying to look like they're general but they said they don't know what to wear. They're not sure. He said, I've never seen so many angry looking people in the village in my life. And then Richie said, the thing that bugs me the most, man, he said, is now suddenly the official mantra is don't trust anybody over 30. He said, I'm over 30. He said, I'm a pretty trustworthy cat. He said, Dave, you're almost 40. People trust you. He said, Jack, you're getting closer to 50. He said, people certainly trust you. And he said, man, listen, if guy 70 years old, Louis Armstrong, could make that beautiful record, maybe it is a wonderful world as he's singing about. And I think that the Woodstock was such an extraordinary event. And mostly it was people just having a good time and enjoying each other's company and some wonderful musicians. I was supposed to go to that and sit in with some of the people that I knew. And I had been playing and working, and I was working in my opera and writing. And I was out at the beach, and I said, man, that's the weekend I was supposed to go fishing with Garrett. I'm not going to miss my chance to go out and maybe catch a real tuna fish instead of one's surf casting all day and just go out that boat and out through the inlet and go in the ocean. I said, I can't miss that. So I didn't go. And one of the kids in the worked for the ferry said, how come you're not going, man? I said, I've been to so many events. I just want to take a weekend off and cool it. So
Hmm.
he came back about 4 days later looking really, I said, how was it, man? He said, oh, man, indescribable.
Because
Then I
there's no
finally,
social media. Nobody knows except if it's on the radio. They may have been aired it, perhaps on television if somebody had it. But this wasn't something where people were getting real time information. What beach were you at?
well, I was at Davis Park,
Over at Davis.
not right where you said where you worked when you were a kid.
Yeah,
But
right at the
um,
docks.
and I was in the volunteer fire department. I'm still a lifetime member of the volunteer fire
Get
department.
out of here. That's cool. Yeah, I know
But
the fire department right there. Of
I
course.
finally saw the movie Woodstock at a drive-in theater about 2 years later, and it was so fantastic.
Ah.
Like everyone else, I got out of our truck that we had on our farm and I sat on the hood because I didn't want to be inside watching such a beautiful event. And I still enjoy that. And I think Jack appreciated the fact that, well, for one thing, so many kids had read his books in spite of the fact that he was supposed to be a washed up one hit wonder failure. It didn't make any difference to all those thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that read and loved his books. But he felt that the branding of calling people hippies was just as bad as calling people beatniks or beat. And I think that he hoped that maybe all that energy wouldn't become dissipated. And I think he was afraid maybe that a lot of the people who thought that that was a fad or a fashion would forget about the ideals
Mm,
and just turn the other way.
mm,
And of course, what happened was the whole country was thrown over in the hands of the right wing as a reaction to that. But essentially, being meditative doesn't mean you're irresponsible. And to be an artist or a good parent or a good person, or to stay healthy enough to enjoy all those joys of life, you got to exercise. You have to do something besides lie around
mm,
and do nothing. So I think he was afraid that the branding and commercialization and marketing of something spiritual, by definition, might destroy what was supposed to be inside the package. So once they
mm,
got the great packaging, they figure, well, the packaging is so good, we can just put some junk inside of it
mm,
and it doesn't make any difference.
mm.
And that's the difference between fast foods. And when I worked as a soda jerk in the 40s, we were taught when you make orange juice how to put water in it and run it down so you could, make more money for the drugstore. And study soda school was showing how to cheat. I said, wait a minute, man, what kind of education is that? And that's unfortunately part of our culture. But then there's the other part, which is doing better than is expected, making that meal so good that you can hardly stand it, making the music better than it's supposed to be,
Mm,
making the environment you're in 5 times nicer. So I was kind of saw that side of our culture too, and worked with carpenters when I was a carpenter's helper and a plumber's helper. And when I worked with Charles Mingus at a place that was like a dump, and he said, no matter how ratty the joint, every night with me is Carnegie Hall. And I saw people in these wretched places making great music and seeing artists making some terrific stuff when they had 2 day jobs to support being an artist.
mm,
And so many gifted people that, and so many community sports things where they have great basketball players and people, never, and boxers that never would be able to make the big time, but were terrific at what they did. I got more attracted to trying to be around people who could show me how to do better than you were expected to do. And I think part of our gig is to encourage people not to say, here's the shortcut, and for $300 in 30 minutes, you can become a star. That shortcut way, that doesn't help out anybody except the hustler who's showing you the shortcut so they can take the money and skip town before they get
mm.
caught.
100%. And just to say, Richie Havens then opens Woodstock in 1969. So you were sitting there with the opener, sitting with you got David Amram, you got Kerouac, you got Richie Havens. Where were you at Monterey Pop Fest? When
No,
you were
no, we were sitting on McDougal Street at a little coffee house,
Oh,
just
cool.
hanging out
Right
and
on. That's cool.
watching.
Right downtown, right on. I
And
love it.
I still love the village. Now it's so expensive and everything. I said, wow, what would O. Henry say if he came back?
Hmm.
He wrote Rose of Washington Square. If he came back to Washington Square today, and I met Eugene O'Neill's son, Sean O'Neill, and he was already an older, pretty much a senior citizen when I met him a long time ago. And he said,
Wow.
no, he said, when my dad was here, he said, man, Provincetown Theater, he said, it was different. And he
Hmm.
said the village was different with Edna St. Vincent Millay. She came later than my dad. Stuff's always changing, and California's always changing.
Yep.
But the beauty part, the spirit of those places still stays the same.
Yes.
So places like Big Sur, they go through so many changes, but there's
Yes.
still that magic. And where you are, there's
I have
still
that book somewhere
a
here.
magical feeling. And parts of New York City have that, and Davis Park and
Yeah.
Patchogue and Blue Point and
Yep.
Riches and all these places,
Yep.
all these
That's
little
right.
places that everybody ignores. There's still something. When you see that great South Bay, boy, that's as beautiful as anything in the world. And when I was
Man.
in the Khyber Pass between Pakistan and Afghanistan, I said, wow, I knew I was in a special place. And when I'm in New Orleans, wherever I go, I try to feel that particular magic and history is there and is everywhere. We
Mm,
just got to be on the lookout for it. And you can't franchise that and you can't explain it. It's like music. You don't really understand it, but you know it's on a higher level than we'll ever understand. And that's what makes it so hip to be part of it, because you're part of something bigger than yourself.
mm,
And that's ultimately much more rewarding than saying, I'm going to take this and franchise this. We haven't found a way yet to franchise the oxygen so we
mm,
breathe until we're told that pollution's killing us.
mm,
But we're searching, or at least we know enough to know the difference. So we try to find a place where we can breathe properly.
mm.
And stuff like water that we take for granted, people have to buy bottled water so they don't kill themselves drinking stuff that's poisoned. But until we get to that point, we have to be aware that all of these gifts that we have are a blessing that we're here there to partake of.
That's right.
So all I think all religions should be respected, whatever it is,
Yeah.
because they're. If, I'd much rather see somebody praying than going out and
Mm.
killing somebody.
100%. And I agree with that.
And to respect all of those things,
Respect.
whether or
That's
not you
right.
believe in them, and to respect agnostics because they got their own
Yes.
struggles and they have the same
Yes.
problems they do in life. And atheists,
Yep.
man, they got that right too. That's what's beautiful about this country. Still, you can be anything that you want to be in
That's
terms
right.
of your spirituality. And
Yes.
as far as living, we just have to get back to the direction we've slowly been going
Mm.
to, like mountain climbing, where you go up
Yeah. Takes
three
time.
steps and slide back two, but then
That's
you go
right.
finally get where you slid back and you go further, and eventually you get to the top. A guy, Sir Edmund Hillary, didn't just uh, take a course on how to be groovy and then tap
Mm.
dance up to the top of Everest. He kept going and going and going, and finally,
Totally.
finally made it. And so I think
They, it's
we're on
it,
the way. I'd say 200 years from now, everything will be cool.
right on. I was gonna listen. I was gonna say we're a young country. What 240? Listen, 76, 86, 96, 240 years old or so. Apologize if my math is a bit off. That's quick math in my head. Listen. In terms of other nations that may have been there for thousands of years, 1,000 years or plus, with different evolutions of who they were. We're still learning how to walk, and it's people like you that teach the nation how to put that step, the next step down in a righteous way, in a way that can lead us in the right direction. Because listen, Dave, I'm 42, right? Uh,
Mm.
I'm a young buck. I don't even know what I am. I think I am a young, and I'm somebody who feels as though everything you said is right on the money. So I just want you to know, like, your ideas transcend time, it transcends generations, and it speaks to the heart of people. And that's what it's all about. And Dave, I just want to say this too. So listen, you at Carnegie Hall, you're a composer. Were you the first? Did you do like the first symphony at Carnegie Hall or so, or one of the big
No,
halls?
I was the first. I was chosen by Leonard Bernstein as the first ever composer in residence with the New York Philharmonic. That was 1966, 67. And it was
Wow.
just such a wonderful thing to be with him and see how much he loved the music and the musicians. And in spite of being a worldwide celebrity and the incredible pressures he had from anybody and everybody, he always took the time to welcome other people into the University of Hangoutology,
Hmm.
including myself. And I remember in the green room, rather than saying, this is the sacrosanct place of the maestro, and you're not welcome unless you can, you know, contribute $1 million to the Lincoln Center and anybody could go back there. So after the concert, you have a mob of people, and a lot of them had never even been to a symphony, but they heard of Leonard Bernstein from West Side Story and his wonderful TV shows he did for kids. Everything he did was just so terrific. So they would go back there, and he'd be sitting there rapping and hanging out with everybody for hours after the concert was over. And one person I remember came up and he said, Mr. Bernstein, my uncle plays the trombone. And I saw the manager of the Philharmonic. He's passed away, so I'm not insulting him, but giving me a dirty look saying, my God, I hope, David, you don't speak to that riffraff whose uncle played the trombone and take up more attention. Possibly some of the patrons might see Leonard Bernstein talking to such a loser, low
Oh
life,
goodness.
and feel that the orchestra was slipping and not worth financing. So Bernstein said in his wonderful pontifical way, I love the trombone. Then he spent about 4 minutes speaking of the Russian Easter Overture, the Rakovsky March, Ravel's Bolero, Bruckner's symphonies, where the trombones all had a chance to shine, and then how in the Wagnerian operas sometimes the trombone would be replaced by the tuban, which is kind of like the French horn player's version of
Yeah.
a junior tuba that sounded
Yeah.
almost like a trombone,
Right on.
almost like a tuba, and almost like, but it had its own thing. And the guy was so happy because Bernstein was reinforcing that he loved the trombone too, and showing all the classical pieces where the trombone contributed so much. And I realized he was making that person happy for the rest of their life because he was relating to them
Mm.
how they related to him, and he wanted the whole world to fall in love with music. And I said,
Hmm.
boy, that was terrific. And I saw at the same time how many people were pathologically jealous and resented him who would still, like myself, probably be having a day job somewhere or doing some kind of weird thing or never get a shot in the music scene, even to be accepted as being a low life loser, but at least you could be part of the mix, so to speak. He did that for so many people, and he made millions of people fall in love with music. And he was a heck of a composer and a conductor and a pianist. Everything he did was just remarkable.
Mm.
No one called Leonardo da Vinci a jack of all trades, bipolar, or schizophrenic. He was just a very gifted man who did a lot of beautiful things very well. And
Mm.
Bernstein was the same way. And I really enjoyed that. And that was actually at Lincoln Center. But I
Wow.
conducted at Carnegie Hall and I played at Carnegie Hall and I really enjoyed it.
Mm.
And when I was there recently, I did my elegy for violin and orchestra with Elmira Dadavarova, this great Bulgarian, amazing first woman ever to be concert master of the Met Opera. And she
Wow.
even played, we did a benefit for the Rohingya refugees. It was a beautiful concert. And
Wow.
the second half of the concert, I didn't have to conduct. So I said, look, I don't want to go out and start hanging out with everybody and interrupt the concert. So is there a way I could sneak out and go in a box seat? If there's an empty seat and sit in the back anonymously and just listen to Beethoven's Ninth.
Oh wow.
So I went out on the second after conducting my piece that was a big thrill, and I just sat just like a customer
Oh
and
wow.
listened and watched and heard the Beethoven's Ninth and said, man, no wonder that gets played so much.
Wow.
Just so thrilling. And I still think about that.
I'll
What
listen
a
to that
great
tonight.
piece it is, and how lucky it was to be able to be there, not only
Wow.
doing my own stuff, but to also hear and see Beethoven and how beautiful and relevant it is and doesn't need any Hollywood plastic surgery or commercial enhancement to
Hmm.
make it more modern. It's just great the way it was. And that's the way I feel what I hope my own written down music can be, so that when I'm gone, people can see what it's like to spend time with the Indian people like I did and write Trail of Beauty based on the Navajo Prayer of the 12th Night, or En Memoria de Chano Pozo, when I took something that I had written for a concert in Cuba with Dizzy Gillespie and Stan Getz, and Los Papinas and Paquito de Rivera and all these great people, and put that in a piece that people could play with the music written down, or the one I just wrote for Harvard called Global Suite for Winds. And the second movement, I used a beautiful melody that I learned a long time ago at a folk festival, and the uh, the Wayfaring Stranger, and then I used this Chinese horn, the horose, that I learned when I was in Chengdu, and used that as a basis for a piece. And my Woody Guthrie Symphony, based on This Land Is Your Land, where I showed all the different places Woody had been, and each variation was based on something. All the things that I've done in my life, I tried to put in the music, just the way Harold in Italy was written to celebrate the life of Lord Byron by Berlioz, but it wasn't a, a diary or a documentary, or was just taking that as taking real life experiences and using them in music. And
Hmm.
I only say that not because I think that's what you have to do, but that's what I felt maybe I should be doing. And therefore, all the experiences that I've had that would say, well, what's a composer doing playing at the Kerrville Folk Festival when he's supposed to be serious cat? Or why is he playing with jazz musicians, or playing in a bar, or playing in a prison, or staying at home and not playing anywhere and writing music when there's nobody supposedly interested? Well, I'm doing that because I felt I wanted to share that with people. And I think that's all anybody has ever done. And my hope is that it also will inspire some young person, 24, when they see me out playing, when I'm not at home writing, and they see that here's a guy 90 having a good time and grateful to be doing it and
Hmm.
happy to be doing it and wishing I could do it better. Maybe that'll encourage them. So when their career counselor says, you're 24 years old, you're too old, you're washed up, no one wants to hear symphony, jazz, poetry, see paintings, go to the theater. You just got to get out of this stupid adolescent fantasy. Well, they have a perfect right to give you that sage advice, but hang out with somebody else.
Right on. Hey, oh, Dave, I just want to say the Leonard Bernstein story is wonderful, because I played the trombone growing up. And the French horn would sit right in front of me. Tuba would be to my right. I was like usually
Yeah.
like a second trombone, like the second trombone. Sometimes I would get like a first piece, but usually I was like the second trombone. And actually, the fellow that owned Satellite Pizza in Bayport, Long Island, he would play trombone also. For some reason, it's coming back to the pizza place in Bayport Blue Point. But Dave, so when you think about it, all of the time you put into composing, it's a legacy that you have. You're somebody who held in incredible regard, and you did a piece for the Manchurian Candidate, the original. You did the score for that
Yeah.
film.
Yeah. I was just, as everything else, including right now, I was lucky. But I was given the chance to do the best. And John Frankenheimer, the director, said two things, David. He said, it's not a Chinese war movie. And he said, the film will tell you what to do. And that was all the instruction. And I was fortunate because Frank Sinatra loved jazz and he loved opera.
Mm.
So they wanted to get a composer that wasn't in charge of an army of 15 gifted ghostwriters, seven orchestrators, and a lawyer that was good enough to figure how can you steal some music, how much can you steal of a Bartok concerto and use that during a fight scene. If you change an inner voice or two, put it in a different key, and how many notes do you have to change in order not to violate the copyright laws? That's all. I mean,
Totally.
look, everyone has to support their families.
Right on.
When I did the score for that in '62, and I was really proud of it, and I still am. One of the people said, It don't sound like movie music. I said, well, it's not movie music. It's music for a film. I said, Aaron Copland wrote some great scores. John Corigliano, terrific American composer, now hadn't started writing for films then, but he wrote one or two terrific scores. Prokofiev wrote the score for Alexander Nevsky. There's some great composers
Mm.
who did some film music, but when they did, and Leonard Bernstein's On the Waterfront, the only one that he wrote for film, they were wonderful music and wonderful for the film. And when I did Splendor in the Grass, the same thing happened. The same words. It doesn't sound, but he added, he said, it doesn't sound like movie music. It's got not a hit song. There's too many chord changes, too weird harmonies. It don't sound like it'd be a hit song.
Hmm.
And and Kazan, who, if you rubbed him the wrong way, was not timid, really scared scared the guy so much he went creeping out and never bothered me. And he said, "Look, David," he said, "I hired you because I didn't want to get a hack. Just do your best, put your heart and soul into it." All he did was tell me to try to really do the best I could and feel something. And he tried to inspire me to do better than I thought I could. And I was lucky to work for people like that so I could do my very best. And it made a big difference. And I did the very best that I could. And I'm happy. It took 50 years, almost 60 years for the Splendor and the Grass to finally come out with the way I had written it for the film, and also to finally the same thing with the Manchurian Candidate and some of the other film scores that I did. But since I had other things that I wanted to do, I was just said, well, at least if the films are there, they can show what I can do, and hopefully I won't have to go around the rest of my life apologizing and saying, "Wow, I just ground that out to make some money." I was did the very very best that I could,
Yeah.
and I do every time
Mm.
I write anything. And I realized that I would have a better chance of doing that if I could write for the concert hall, even though that's next to impossible. And now some of those pieces that are getting played, some of the ones I've done recently, but some of the ones I did 30, 40 years ago are now being discovered and they sound just as good. So
Mm.
when people say, well, what does it feel like? You're 90 years old and now your stuff's really getting out there. I said, well, Moses was in the desert 40 years, so I'm right on schedule. And I encourage everybody listening, if you're told you suck, you can't do it, go shove it, give up, just realize that people have the constitutional right to say that, and they probably never looked at it or listened to it. But if you can get it finished, that's a heck of a thing.
Mm.
And to go ahead and do it
That's right.
and and then do the next one and try to find at least one person that you can play it for, sing it to, show it to, read it
Mm.
to, whatever it is you're doing, and then go ahead and do other things. And also, if you're performing in some way, don't forget to learn to improvise. And also, the audience, people, whoever is there, will let you know how you're doing
Mm.
because we're not just supposed to do it. Bernstein told me, he said, David, your job as composer in residence is not just to please yourself. You're supposed to contribute something to the repertoire. And
Mm.
that's something in the 1960s. If you were a classical composer, you were supposed to set the piano on fire and throw it out the window. Hopefully, it wouldn't kill anybody. And therefore, the New York Times would say, it's a very good piece because it shows American foreign policy needs improvement. And the idea was to make a big splash and not to contribute something to the repertoire, or that wasn't even considered. We
Mm.
were Most people were trained. All the composers of the past, from Guillaume de Machaut, who came centuries before Bach, up through Bela Bartok and whoever contemporary composers were at that moment, are your enemy, the musicians are your enemy, and the conductors are your everybody is your enemy. Nobody's going to appreciate it, including other composers, and that's what it was about. So in the university situations, then that's changed, thank heavens, a little bit. We're basically, since they considered music and the top school colleges, not music schools, but the top universities to be a complete waste of time if you weren't studying law or business or medicine. Why even bother to study music? That was like entertainment was
Yeah.
considered to be one step above the sanitation department and
Hmm.
below the football
Yep.
team. So therefore, the professors of composition were forced to prove that they were as great intellectuals as Albert Einstein was for physics and do something that was so revolutionary and incomprehensible and intellectually brilliant that no one could understand it, including the person who created it. And therefore, you could have a certain level of being profound that would prove that even though you were doing low entertainment called
Yep.
music, you were still worthy to be in that university. So as a result, the many of the composers not to be completely dumped upon like they weren't there had to become fossilized in order to fit into academia, and then their job was to train the next generation of PhDs how to become professional fossils so that they could teach the next generation. And therefore, when I came to New York and I said, well, man, here I am playing with Charles Mingus and I'm writing for Shakespeare in the Park. I better get down with the get down
Hmm.
and see what the composers are doing who are really supposed to be on the top of the game for this month. So I went to a concert, and the person running the concert said, coming to this concert is hard work. If you're not interested and you just want to be entertained, we don't want you here. I said, wow, they hadn't played a note. He was always telling everybody to go home before they even started. And then they played some of this stuff for about 2 hours. I said, damn, man, I've heard so much music from all over the world, including the great treasures of the standard repertoire. What is this? And then I saw that almost the entire audience was all full of angry composers hating each other and not enjoying it, and the musicians all looking like I should have been a lab technician. I said, wait a minute, man. That's what they call modern music, known as the next cell to the solitary confinement in the ghettoized prison of academia,
Mm.
shoved into a concert hall sponsored by someone who needed a tax write-off, couldn't see past. I said, wait a minute, this is too far removed from everything I've already been blessed to receive that I don't understand, but it gives me a certain feeling I should understand it more. So I just went out on my own, and I've been very fortunate. Now the times have changed. So now I'm credited in this. I was a pioneer of multiculturalism in world music. I said, are you kidding? Do you ever read Shakespeare's plays? I worked for 12 years writing music for them. Every play took place in Hamlet was in Denmark. Shakespeare never went to Denmark. Uh, Macbeth was in Scotland. Most of the people from where he came from in London didn't go to Scotland because that was a different culture and they weren't really welcome there that much and were fighting with the British all the time. Um, the, the Othello was a Moor, and certainly Shakespeare didn't ever go into what had been Moorish country in that part when the African American or African people from Africa were a big part of that culture at the time that Othello took place.
Yes.
And the character of Shylock, which Shakespeare wrote about so beautifully, Shakespeare certainly wasn't part of the Jewish community in London. So all of his plays took places in cultures that were, or Twelfth Night were, and the Isle of Illyria that he fantasized he'd never been out to see. He intuited that, and he knew the legends and the stories, and living in a seaport town, got a world view from people who had come from all over the world and been into London as a port. And just as New Orleans was a port to share Cuban and French music, along with and the indigenous music of the native people who came from the Everglades and people who came all the way from Canada,
Mm.
Acadie, and went into the not only into the cities, but those who didn't stay in New England, who went down to New Orleans, came there via the swampland. All of these aspects that were part of New Orleans music came from communities where they were influenced by other people. George Gershwin, using African American music and blues and jazz that he heard and Hasidic music that he heard in Brooklyn, these are all things that influenced these people. So they were multicultural, you might say,
Mm.
way before I was born. And the great writers of the past all had that kind of a global perspective. And of course, then when they said, well, because I've used jazz and Jewish music and Native American music and anything else that I've been part of my life and what I did, I was successful crossover. I said, there's no such thing as crossing over in the land of beauty. If you take a bridge and you go across the river to another part, you're not going to a different planet. You're still in the land of beauty. You're just in a different part. So there's nothing to cross over to because you're already there.
You're already there.
And then
That's
the
right.
other thing that I sort of tried to make clear was that I wasn't into fusion because when you play chopsticks, your viewer, your listeners can't see, but if you take two fingers and play your two fingers are moving in different directions. Therefore, that's fusion. And anything of more than one person playing is fusion. So music by definition is already fusion. If you play a
Mm.
chord, you're already playing fusion. So I only say all of that because very often they begrudgingly give somebody a label that's supposed to be a compliment, but also a label so that other people say, well, I guess that's what to do this month. And then you
Yeah.
be hip until it's out of fashion.
Yeah.
Music's got nothing to do with labeling or fashion.
Hmm.
They're different styles.
That's right.
And the different styles, each one of those styles, like learning a language, is a lifetime study. But
Mm.
you can get close to that by hanging out with those who were born into those cultures which produced the art or the music in this case that you're
That's right.
aware of, and learn a little more about that. And that's some deep stuff, and
Oh,
that's
yes.
something you could spend your whole life doing. So my hope is in the compositions that when I'm gone or when I'm not around, which is more and more the case as more people are playing my stuff, they'll get that piece of paper, take the instrument out of the case, and start going over it. And maybe they'll feel something at least a second or third time through. And then that'll kindle something in themselves. And they'll take that feeling and make it their own feeling. And then the people listening will have something to listen to. And that's
Mm.
called music. So
Mm.
the composer is just somebody that's supposed to, among other things, foster creativity in those who are performing it, playing it, singing it,
And,
conducting it,
and
and
Dave,
hopefully to people who are listening will get some feeling of life. And I can dare say that because that's what happens when I hear music. And I go on YouTube now, and man, I hear stuff from all over the world,
heck yeah.
including modern composers. And just last night, seeing Leonard Bernstein conducting his original version of West Side Story before it went in the theater and had to cut most of it out. And he had opera singers hitting all the notes and singing so beautifully, and
Hmm.
great orchestra playing all that complicated. Man, there were some things in there I never had heard before, just so beautiful. And seeing Thelonious Monk when he's playing in Europe and in Japan and Asia
Hmm.
and in Scandinavia when they really recorded his stuff and filmed his stuff because they happened to think he was a great artist, not just some stoned out derelict that was
Hmm.
playing a kind of music that was popular for 15 minutes and somewhere, but appreciated this was something really serious. And hearing a young woman who played the Tchaikovsky violin concerto, my God, I never heard it played like that in my life.
Wow.
See Duhamel, that young conductor from Venezuela who can take all the classics and newer music and just make it sound so alive and make see the musicians all playing up a storm and smiling, and some terrific jazz singers, amazing younger people doing all kinds of stuff, and all the folk players that I see when I go to Woody Fest and Kerrville Festival and some of the festivals in Canada, and singer songwriters and country when I play with Willie Nelson at Farm Aid and see all the people that Willie has, not to mention his own amazing. There's so much terrific stuff out there that there's you don't have enough in a lifetime even to get started. So it's not that we're in a dead field. What is dead is the music industry, like the Titanic, too big, too fast, did not serve the needs of the customers, poorly administered, and sunk. But the
Hmm.
music didn't sink. The people who perform and play and create that music are more than ever better trained. And there's a gigantic audience out there that would like to be able to be treated with the respect that they deserve, that we all deserve. And so this is a new thing. And the pandemic, as horrible as it is forcing a lot of us to figure out how we can sneak out and start all over again. And also give people, maybe I'll just sit at home and listen to something till I can hear something live and just listen to it and see if it says something to me, just to get back
Hmm.
to the nitty gritty
That's
of
right.
what it's supposed to be. We have
And
to remember Plato did all of his stuff under a tree. I even when I was in Greece, in Athens, I saw this. I don't probably not the same tree, but they said that's the tree where Plato and Socrates hung out with their, at least it was a small place, and the theater that they had there was still pretty small. And you figure when the Gettysburg Address was delivered at a train station, not in a ball at a stadium, and the Sermon on the Mount wasn't done on network television. That was just out, you know, out in the
that's right.
road. A lot of the heavier stuff that we think about was small but beautiful. So small is beautiful, and
Yes.
if it gets bigger, that's great. But it's not dependent. As I think, as long as I always tell people now that I'm actually getting people to come and listen, I say, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasant shock not to have the band outnumber the audience.
I was gonna ask too, Dave, man. I know I've had you on for like an hour and 45 minutes. Whenever you
Oh,
got to get going, you let me know because listen, I could sit here all day and talk to you. I'm just a sponge, learning from you. And but I just got to say, McGillicuddy, I think the name was
all right.
McGillicuddy in Pull My Daisy. That was your character. What was the first name?
Mez
Mez.
McGillicuddy.
Mez McGillicuddy. That's
I
right.
said, Jack, I said, what? I said, I'm not, I haven't acted since the 10th grade. What am I supposed to do? Mez McGillicuddy, the Irish deranged French horn player, he said, just be you. And I said,
Wow.
wow, that's the Stanislavski method in a nutshell.
That's great. Listen, can I hold you on for a couple minutes and then get you
Sure.
going? We'll keep for just a couple more minutes. I just want to ask you about that. Just sort of bring you back for a moment. We talked a lot about, uh, you know, people that you've known and all, and the work you've done. Uh, but you 90 years young versus Dave Amram 19 years young. What's the similarities?
Well, it's shocking. The wonderful woman I was with for a long time, who helped me with my archives, a brilliant, incredible person, great college professor and super organized. She said, I've tried to help you with your archive. And she said, I see stuff you wrote to your mother and father when you're still in school and when you're in the army. She said, you're saying the same thing your whole life. I said, well,
Hmm.
I guess I must mean it. And sometimes I'm shocked. I look at stuff, I've written or I hear music I wrote a long time ago. I say, man, that sounds like me.
Hmm.
And I realize I'm trying to, each time I do it, there's an empty piece of paper. And it's just like what Dizzy said about playing the trumpet. He said, every morning I wake up, said, it's sitting in that case waiting for me.
Hmm.
And I feel the same way of, oh man, what do I do now? Here's a blank piece of paper. You're starting from scratch. So in that sense, it hasn't changed. And you don't want to write the same piece over and over again. And you don't want to do the same thing over and over again. But there are certain things, and I realized without knowing it, I was on a certain, I guess you'd say, some kind of a path or trail, and I'm still on it. And at this point, my job is to figure out how to stay on it, not to get derailed.
Yeah.
And I've always told kids, who are scuffling, that only thing worse than obscurity is recognition, because at that point you're told, now you have to move to another level, which means giving up your family, giving up your friends, giving up your culture, your heritage,
Hmm.
your neighbors, everything that you've done, and moving into a new real estate situation where where you're un, unwelcome, surrounded by other crazed, insecure people that feel, well, maybe if I should go even further up, and you get on that until you get dumped and you commit the worst crime you can in American culture, which is to fall out of fashion. So the best
Hmm.
thing, one of my favorite parts in the book collaborating with Kerouac is Gary Goodrow, who's an amazing, he was with a group called The Committee. He was a fantastic improviser and artist and played saxophone. And he was in the original play, The Connection. In fact, it took place in his apartment. That's where Jack Gilbert got the idea.
Oh wow.
And Gary could improvise a whole play or a whole doll. He was amazing. And he said, David, he said, if you continue on your path, this was 1965. I remember it, and I wrote it in the book. He said, if you continue on this path that you're on, you'll be able to spend your whole life and never be fashionable. So I guess part of the thing is when suddenly things churn, instead of being considered to be a Neanderthal crazed, unfashionable old has been, was been, never would be wreck, you're considered to be fashionable. Then how do you deal with that and not be panicked that maybe next year you, instead of going higher, you'll go lower? Of course the answer to that is to try to keep your head on straight. And in my case, I have three wonderful kids and the grandson, and they can all help me to keep it for real.
Hmm.
Because as you know, your own kids, boy, you can't get away with anything. They'll tell you exactly how you're doing. And if they enjoy something, that's like the biggest, greatest headline review of all time.
Mm.
And that's important because otherwise, if you're surrounded by yes men and yes women, you can really be messing up and you'll never know it. And
Hmm.
then if you get in a big enough situation, you have to hire people to tell you how great you are, and then you really suck. You can't you can't develop, and you can't also appreciate what other people are doing. So I guess the thing that's most different is after you've been striving and striving for your whole life, then you could say, well, maybe I better strive now to get better and to make it better for other people and to encourage and inspire other people. And one of the nicer things about getting older is you don't look in the mirror that much because you see all those wrinkles and white hair. You say, wait a minute, man, it must be something wrong with the mirror. Then you say, oh my God, that's what I'm actually look like. That's what I am now. Wow, what a weird thing that is. Well, the reality is that if you're not thinking about that, you're not looking in the mirror and you're not totally consumed with me, I, me,
Yeah,
it's much more time available to appreciate other people and what they're doing and how they're
that's right.
feeling and to learn to say hello and all over again and to, you know, try to become civilized.
And Dave,
Grown
you
up.
make 90 look good, brother. I just want you to know you're a handsome gentleman. And like you said, the consumer culture, what they put out for people to buy into, you have to look this way, yada, yada. Listen, if it was put out, you know, as you mentioned, you have for somebody who has gray hair and wrinkles, if that was considered to be fashionable, as we're talking about, then heck, that's what's considered to be okay. This new way of, wanting to be, and I just think it's so important that people recognize the beauty in growing uh, older and the wisdom attained through that process because like
Well, you know
90
one.
years young you look brother like you look outstanding man.
Well, thank you. But you know the thing is, Satchel Paige, a great pitcher, was because of being African American when he was coming up in the playing ball in the 20s and 30s and the 40s because he started out when he was a young guy and he was famous. He struck out Babe Ruth and two other great great ball players in one exhibition game when he was what they called the Negro League. Finally, I think he was a that nobody knew exactly how old he was, but they figured he was around 50. He was with the Cleveland Indians, I believe, and he was the rookie of the year.
Wow, that is
He finally got in the
crazy.
major leagues, and he can still do it. They said,
That's
"Well,
right.
Mr. Page, because of the social conditions, you know, before Jackie Robinson, you know, there was no opportunity for you or anybody
Mm.
to ever be in the major leagues. How do you feel about that?" He said, "You know," he said, "I had such a good time playing ball." He said, "I didn't care about that." He said, "I enjoyed it so much. I never let old age catch up with me." And
That's right.
I thought that was terrific.
Oh, that's I love that. Dave,
Yeah.
can I read one last thing, then get you going? And it's from your book, Offbeat. I just would love to read a couple lines of it that are, I think, just sort of indicative uh, of who everyone, of who you were considered to be, who your friends were, and what the spirit of the time was. Uh, it says, okay, this is page 135. Okay. I can't believe you completed a sentence, said Gregory. Oh, shut up, said Tiffany. Save all your insults for those pathetic women that go to hear you read your poems. They're not pathetic, said Gregory. They're intelligent. They're sensitive. They want meaning and romance in their lives. I'm like Jack. I come from the classic tradition of literature. I'm self taught. I went to libraries like Jack did. I read all the time when I was in jail. Jack read when he was out at sea. We were both I'm sorry, naturals. Neil is a natural. Dave is a natural. So are Gary and Freddie. That's why we're all friends. We're all drifting down the same stream. And then, without a paddle, gal, said Neil. Understand that society wouldn't let us on board their train. So we built our own canoes, and now they've taken away our paddles. but we're cool because we know how to improvise. My brother, listen, I've had you on for 2 hours now, and this was a joy to just to be able to sit here and rap with you. I want you to know anytime you'd like to do this, we could do it all fair, just chit chat too. I know you got the family, and right now, listen, how's everything? How's the family doing? Is everybody safe? Everybody healthy? How are you doing? You look great.
Oh, thank. Well, I'm very fortunate. I'm blessed because they're all healthy. Alana's living in California, and she's hanging in there, writing songs, making a new record, and she works every week doing stuff for homeless people, in the kitchens out there, and she does all kinds of plays with different bands and does just about everything. And when things get slow, she always finds a way to work, and she has a good work ethic because she, being brought up on that farm, she
Mm.
saw her father doing some grunt work too,
Mm.
and realized you have to do that if you're going to have a farm or do anything in life. My second daughter, Adira's, has a wonderful young boy, my grandson Oliver, who's 7, who's wild and just such a treat to be with. And
That's
her husband's
beautiful.
amazing. And
Blessings to them
this
all.
little tiny place, I guess like the one your folks got in Blue Point, and fixed the whole thing up. And now with the pandemic, they're able to stay there and just go back to Brooklyn
Good.
once in a while and stay healthy. And my ex-wife's living with them, and she's doing terrific. And my son Adam is amazing. He's a great drummer. He plays with me a lot, and he has his own group, and he plays with all kinds of people. And in addition to being doing construction work and carpentry and electrical work, he's converted his whole little place where he lives with his wife Yukari and has made a whole recording studio, including people that have given him stuff because they don't use the old technology.
Sure.
So he was able to make a whole recording studio using the old sound ways, which sounds so good.
Oh,
In
maybe
addition to
we want to
the
record another album, my wife and I.
right,
So
he,
maybe we can
he did
record
that,
one day with them. That'd be super cool.
and I probably will. And they're doing a new film about me called Amram at 90
What
Notes
was the
from
last one?
First.
80? They had one for 80,
Yeah,
right?
it was one called David Amram, the first 80 years. Now
Yeah, that was good. That was good. I watched that a couple times.
and somebody got is writing a book called Amram Reader, which is going to be all things written by other people about stuff I do in the theater and music and
100's going to be
concert
good.
music.
Amram at 100. It's going to be called Amram. How do you say 100? It's going to be, how do you say 100 in Italian? It's going to be Amram
Yeah,
100, 100 to go. That's how I see it.
and then the other thing is the guy who I'm writing a new book called Amram at 90 Notes from a Promising Young Composer.
That's right. That's right. I love
And
that.
but my hope is, and I'm writing a new piece for Elmira Dadavarova, and then probably starting on another orchestral piece. But I'm fortunate, to do what I love to do, and my main concern is to try to do it well and encourage others to do the same. And I'm just so glad to know all the things that you're doing and see. You know, I remember when I wouldn't say I snuck you into the concert when I invited you to come in.
Yeah.
I've had so many times I was able to go to music when I was, in fact, my double concerto that I wrote for violin called Partners. First movement was for Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger. Second movement for Billie Holiday and Lester Young, and the third movement for Machito and Celia Cruz, with the violin and the cello,
Woo.
each celebrating that musical couple, and each movement having a different idiom. And one of the things that made me feel I'd like to write a piece for violin, cello, and orchestra was a concert where I was snuck in. That's correct verbiage, correct language. I snuck. I was invited to to by someone named Spinoza Piaf in 1963, who called himself a senior citizen hot rodder, He was this fantastic viola player, like legendary, but he was a serious guy. So when he played in the studios, of the conductor that had to, everybody had to put on earphones because they couldn't know how to beat 1, 2, 3, 4, and and they had to, they have click tracks so he could just slop around, and it was pretty much like a sausage factory. And the person would start screaming at them instead of just sitting there picking up his checks. The notes would say, "Excuse me, but we don't have anything where you want us to play louder. We have six measures of rest or whatever." He he would speak up when he felt it would be necessary to make a correction. So he was banned from ever being in the recording, even though he's one of the best viola players. But everybody loved him. He was a crazy guy and a great player. He played in the Manchurian Candidate and the other film scores I did because
Oh wow.
he was a friend of Stanley Plummer, the concert whom I got to be concertmaster, who also had never played in the studio till I invited him, and he was a monster great player and knew the other monster great players, and had some great players in the studios too. But he was somebody that was kind of blackballed. But he had this old card. He said, "I'm a senior citizen hot rodder." I remember that's what he did. So I said, "Well, look, this is Yasha Heifetz and Piatigorsky, Heifetz the violinist and Piatigorsky the cellist, playing a world premiere of a piece by Nicholas Rosa, who was an excellent composer that was stuck in Hollywood, but still wrote some wonderful stuff,
Hmm.
concert music too, but mostly was hired to grind out some. But he wrote his own music, so he was considered to be sort of an oddball. He was a great composer that just happened to come there because of the World War II, and they were doing a piece of his, and I knew, well, he was writing from films, but I knew he was a heavyweight as a composer. I thought I'd like to hear that piece. I said, "How can you get it?" He said, "They all love me, even though I'm a big mouth." So he snuck me into that concert, and I heard
Yeah.
this amazing concert that I never would have gotten into because
Wow, that's crazy. That's
it was
cool. So
sold out.
you got the sneak in too. Yeah, that you passed it forward to me, and you got
Exactly.
me in. That's
And,
cool.
and, and a lot of other places where I went to Eddie Condo's when I was 14 years old, and they said, "Hey, you can't come in, kid. There's a drinking law, but just stay in the back, but just drink ginger ale because we don't want to lose our license." And I had lots of things where I've been invited to come because I really wanted to hear it, and there was nothing I could do for the person who invited me. It's just they saw I really wanted to do it or hoped I could do it. I was invited with the same thing, but a guy named Will Gilbert, who was a street preacher, who was a most people thought was a nutcase. He was like a brilliant guy. I always hung out with him in the village. He said Elizabeth Taylor is going to make her stage debut in New York, and she was having a big love affair with Richard Burton just before they
Wow.
got married. And there were lines all around the block. Richard Burton was a great actor, but because of her being there, I mean, it was scary.
Wow.
I said, "Man, how are you going to get in here?" He said, "Just follow me, wait and see." And sure enough, he was friends with all the ushers and the people, and he snuck me in. Anyway,
Hey.
I've been, a lot of things I've gone to that I really enjoyed that I never would have gotten into. So when I had you come, I never dreamed you'd be doing what you're doing, and here I am on your show 20 years later,
What,
whatever. But that's
Dave?
all
It's
the whole
like
thing.
what you said about luck. That's how I feel. I've gotten so lucky, and I mean to meet you, and it was crazy because like 2 months before me and you met, I played at the Yippee Cafe down on Bleecker Street with a fella AJ Weberman, who
Oh,
put. If you know AJ, you know AJ.
you're the garbologist.
The Garbologist, yes, and did a whole maybe did a whole thing with Dylan on Dylan too. I forget, but
He's
uh,
rated as trash can.
yeah. And so they put me on, and I have video of it. and David Peel and the Lower East Side Band played. So I got to play with David Peel that day,
He was
and
terrific.
oh, what a good guy!
He
What a
has
good
his song
dude!
"Slum Goddess of the Lower East Side." That was his big hit.
Wow, yes. And the New York City hippie one I always like too. I'm proud to be a New York City hippie. And I just then I got to meet you 2 months later or so in like August, September, and that was in like May, June, and it was just insane. And it was luck. I did listen. You know, I'm from them working class streets. We didn't grow up in the on where the big mansions are. We, just the humble. Paycheck to paycheck. What my dad earned is what the family got to eat on that week, and all I know is working. I work at an early age, but I had this thing in me where I love to read and I like to write. And the kids in my neighborhood were a little crazy. I had some crazy kids in the neighborhood down there in Long Island where I grew up. So not all of them were really into reading. But when I got put on to, gosh, when I got put on to you and your friends, you and Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg and the whole crew of them, uh, I was like, gosh, these were like regular people, but they were what I would consider intellectuals, musicians. These are the cool people, and it gave me a sense that you know what you have this intellectual side in you. You're not just a kid from the working class streets. You could exercise that. You could put your guitar on. You can go try to play music in front of people, which I did. I ended up doing, and now my wife and I are the subjective perspective, and we play whenever we can. And if we ever get the blessing of playing with you one day and just having a jam session, that'd be super cool. Obviously, right now the pandemic can't can't really do much. I know, but that's why it's you and your love that you put out there to everybody you meet. You're so good to everybody you meet, Dave. And I just want to thank you for being an inspiration in my life. And what I'm going to do is I had read the poem to you last time, so I won't do it again. But everybody checking this out, watch the first episode. Listen to the first episode 100 episodes ago with Dave. And I read a poem in homage to him from what Thelonious Monk had once told you. And it was some advice I put in my life. He said, straight ahead, no chaser.
Yeah.
And goodness gracious, Dave, listen, I want to leave you with the final word. Usually I do favorite colors and all that, but we did that the first episode. So I just want to give you a moment to share any wisdom at 90 years young, looking like you're 50, looking handsome as always, the man. Any
Well,
last words to the audience of generations
oh, sure.
across the
Well, I would
spectrum?
say, first of all, is don't worry about aging. If you can do it, it's great. If I knew it was this much fun to turn 90, I would have done it years ago. And secondly, you're only as old as you make other people feel. And third of all, if there's any people my age, especially if you're still alive, and you shouldn't be up this late, enjoy it and try to hang out with your kids and your grandkids and explain to them that you can probably give them some advice because if you've messed up a certain situation two or three hundred times, you can at least show everybody what not to do. And that's sometimes a
Yes.
big help. You're not necessarily you can say how to do it, but you could show I'd sure know how not to do it. And I think mostly for younger folks too, try and hang out with your parents and grandparents and invite them to some of the stuff that you're doing because actually we need you guys more than you need us.
Hmm.
And that's a good thing. And I think we understood and I've been to a lot of places in the world where people hang out and they say, "Oh, you're going out with some lady." They're bringing along the parents, the uncles, the children, the grandparents because they don't want her to get raped or something. It's much more than that. You find out sometimes some families like to hang out together. And I've been in too many places in the world where I've seen that, where they don't have a fraction of what we have. But the fact that they've got that, everybody looks a little more fulfilled and happy. It's not that big a deal.
Mm.
And secondly, just to try to enjoy life and be grateful for what blessings we have and try to share some of that with others. And just to say it's great to see you and hearing what you've done. I'm glad if I could just be a small
Mm.
part of that.
Uh,
And
Dave,
that's
I am so beyond it's to hear that from you is incredibly inspiring. I always think about what you said about Pete Seeger, your buddy Pete, when you talked about it last episode with us, when he says he was going to go to that big jam session in the sky. He was going to go on tour, I think, right? And so
yeah.
I guess we're all going to go on tour, right? We're going to go to that big jam session, that tour that never stops. And I just want you to know, like, it, quite frankly, uh, I am so humbled by your presence. I could just sit here and listen to you all day. I have tons of questions, which I didn't ask you tons of questions because you pretty much answered everything with everything that you've said. Whatever comes out of your thought process is something that this world needs to know. And that's why I teach about you. I teach about you. I teach about your friends. And I just graded a whole bunch of papers the other day, actually, all on you and Jack. And students did a little research on you all because this is where we need to find the wisdom that will direct us in a very healthy direction in the future. Uh, David Amram, one of my friends, somebody who I would call years back to. My son's doing good too. Dave's son,
Great.
no, forget about it. 20 years old. Oh, forget about it. Everyone's getting old, Dave. You know how it is. And your kids and your grandkid, Ali, they're blessed to have you. And I know you're blessed to have them. And if your
Oh,
kids
well,
ever want to be on the show, they have an open invitation. And if your son ever wants to down the road, maybe I can record our album. We'll pay you all the any costs it is. I have a good feeling he probably learned some basics of music from someone he knows. Maybe his dad.
well, actually, I tried to show kids to say please and thank you, work all that old time stuff, which is actually what so called conservatives found their philosophy on. So you find out the basic principles of living isn't either or. It's we, us, because we're all humans. And so I don't believe it in demonizing, saying, well, we're better than you, or we're holy and you're not, or we're considerate and you're not, or we're more human. That's a, forget about that. It's just this basic, simple stuff that works for thousands of years and will always be relevant because it's real and it's truthful and it works. So with my kids, I try to give them some foundation, but then had to learn and learn every time to stay out of the way and not be a control freak so that they have to become zombies of a third rate imitation of me, or they have to be four times better or worse, just to have them be them. And that's the best thing any of us can do for anybody else to encourage. Jack Garfine, he was in 14 concentration camps and came over here as a kid and somehow made a life for himself. He was amazing. He just passed away. What a guy. And he said, he was the first director. He directed, he was married to Carol Baker. He directed her in that wonderful film he directed two films, then they went to Europe. But and then he came back here before he passed away. And he said, I was in the elevator with Kazan at the Actors Studio, and Kazan was at the top of his game, and I was the first director who was hired as a director at the Actors Studio, which was a place built for actors without
Yes.
directors, just to become better actors among themselves.
Yes.
And they would direct each other. I was the first person who was showing them how they could be directors. That's
Wow.
was a big honor for me.
Wow.
And Kazan, who was one of the founders, along with Lee
Wow.
Strasberg,
That's crazy.
became a director, but he was like a terrific actor in his youth. And Kazan was in the elevator with him. They were all alone. He said, "You know, Jack," he said, "our job as directors is to be guides." I said, "Wow." In other words, to help open up the door, but not to be control freak. You're going to be my metal slave. And I
Yes.
think that's what we can all sort of be for others.
I
And I'm trying to work on that. And then I'm trying to put my heavy philosophy into action. Because
that's
if you can't,
hey, it's
because
it's good.
walking
Clear
the
my
talk
throat.
that
Sorry.
you talk is a much harder than talking the talk that we talk.
Listen, I've had you on for 2 hours and 15 minutes. I
Well,
don't
you
want
got
to
me out of
keep you
my
much
shell.
longer now. Let me
You,
first say, brother, this is episode 148 of the Subjective Perspective Show on Be Awoke Entertainment. What an honor. We are ecstatic to have you with us today, Dave. David Amram, this is, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, the Beat Generation from what they've termed it, right? I know you and your friends weren't calling it the Beat Generation. That's something that, as you mentioned, became the commercialized term of what they were putting out.
yeah,
And this is somebody, ladies and gentlemen, who is from that generation and somebody who transcends generations. So, David Amram, I know I always say Dave, but I want to thank you. And as Dave signs off, I am now going to read one last piece in David Amram's Offbeat. And this is a really cool piece. Page one. Goodness gracious. Let me see. Oh, boom, 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 boom. Here it is. So, just to give a little insight to David Amram, again, this is Offbeat. And sort of bringing full circle some ideas I was talking about what the Beat Generation, what David Amram symbolizes with his friends that he knew, that he knows. Page 186, and this is chapter 15. All of us love to hang out together. My milieu, like Jack's, was never restricted to 4 or 5 gloomy people snarling at the world. Contrary to some people's version of Beat Generation history, all of us, wherever we were and whoever we were with at the moment, expected the unexpected. Since anybody within hearing range was an automatic member of an unsolicited audience, we always got instant feedback. We never worried about recording what we did for fun. We honestly felt that not that many people were interested. What is now known in the hip hop world as freestyling, we called scat, singing, or scatting. Scatting was also a term used to describe a vocal style that reinterpreted the way various instruments in the band played by singing sounds that emulated the great jazz instrumentalists as they played their solos. Now, that's pretty cool. The exponents of Latin music, especially those who played Afro Cuban style congas, could sing all the drum sounds. In addition to this instrumental style of singing, improvised words and rhymes were also part of the daily bill of fare. It was a constant floating feast of words and sounds. Last paragraph pretty much ties up the entire interview. Offbeat, you want to get it? I got this right from Dave's car. So if you could do that, makes it good, right? Oh, Dave's back on. Let's see. Hold on. Let's see. Hey there. You back for some more?
I was so perfect. You said, David, and then my machine cut out. I said, man.
Hey, listen, David, I knew there was, don't even worry. No, I was actually reading perfect piece in this book. Page 186 sums up, I was just saying to the audience, the entire interview. Watch. I'll go into the last paragraph I was going to read, and I'll let you go. Almost none of this. I just read about how hip hop music, scatting, singing, everything that we were talking about. Almost none of this that Jack and I and so many others did was ever recorded. The one time it was at Jerry Newman's studio in 1959, the night after Jack finished recording the improvised narration for Pull My Daisy with my improvised accompaniment. Jack and I took turns playing piano for one another and also took turns making up rhyme stories and songs on the spot. We wailed away for almost 4 hours as Jerry recorded us, occasionally emerging from the control room to give us a variety of legal and illegal refreshments. Hey, I just want to say, brother, we love you here. We love you, man. Love you, brother. You're somebody who has inspired me in ways you may not even recognize. Just you've said so many things to me that I've taken into my life when we've talked, for hours as I'm sitting on the Great South Bay. And I think you're upstate. Are you upstate now on the Hudson?
Yeah, I'm up in Beacon.
Hey, yeah, it's a pretty area.
Beacon, New York.
Area. Hey, that's right. You should be there. I think that's a good place. I think it's a beautiful area. And listen, I won't keep you longer. I'll give you the last word, though. And I want to say again, everybody, this is episode 148 of the Subjective Perspective Show, the one and only David Amram. Dave, man, my man, if you want to give the last word.
Well, Nick, give your kids a big hug, and I send everybody all the joy for the remaining days of Hanukkah, for Christmas, for Ramadan, for Armenian Women's International Women's Day, for Chinese New Year, for St. Patrick's Day, all the holidays. And don't forget Billie Holiday.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Amram, episode 148. Dave, what I'm going to do is go into a musical piece for a little bit from you. And I'm going to go into one of the songs, actually. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to see if you can see it on your side. So right now, you can't see this, but I actually want to. I think you'll like this. Hold on one sec. I can't see you right now. So right now, I'm on another page getting a music video open. So give me 2 seconds. And I'm only going to show 30 seconds of the clip because this is from the E-Town webisode, episode 769. They do a wonderful job there. You did incredible pieces, and they have this up there. And this is what you were mentioning earlier, a song titled What a Wonderful World. And right now I got to, okay, so now I'm back. I'm going to screen share. Let's see if this works. I'm sorry. So I'm going to share the sound. Okay. So Dave, tell me if you can see this.
Right.
I'm going to try to play this for like 30 seconds. Here it goes. This is What a Wonderful World, everybody. And this is from the E-Town webisode 769, as you can see.
A Wonderful World.
Dave sent it on over.
I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed days and the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what wonderful world. I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me, for you. And I think to myself, what wonderful world.
Now I'm going to pause it there. I'm going to take it off a screen share. I know I'm echoing for a second. I should fix that here. Okay, that should be a little better. What a beautiful piece, and for pretty much just making sure that I give total credit to the E-Town webisodes for that clip that you sent on over, and check them out so they can get the credit on their page to watch the full version. So I think that's totally the right thing to do. But Dave, what a beautiful, beautiful piece, and man, just got to ask you, you did a thing with Steve Earle. That was?
Yeah, that was a show we did together. I met him actually when he was younger than what you were when I met you. He was living in San Antonio and he came to the Kerrville Festival, which was a few miles from San Antonio, and not a few, about 80 miles, which in Texas is a small trip.
Yep.
And he was just so smart and such a wonderful guy. Then I didn't see him for years, and I was at Farm Aid. This guy had all black shirt and black pants. I said, Dave, Amram, remember me? Steve from San Antonio. Steve Earle. I said, oh man, I haven't seen you in years. And we started talking. And I said, gee, it's great you're here. And I saw he had a guitar. I said, are you playing? Are you going to play with somebody? He said, yeah, I'm here with my band. I said, oh. And then he said, I'm going out. So I said to my son, Adam, who was little then, he was about 14. I said, Adam, let's go out and hear him. And he said, Daddy, he's famous. I said, no kidding. Because I hadn't seen him in so long, and he was terrific. And then
that's
then I
amazing.
got to see him afterwards, and we did some readings. He did wonderful readings of Kerouac and read his own poetry, and we did some stuff together like that. And we played at a place in the city, and we played at his bookstore where his poetry came out. And it's just a delight to know him, and he's just such an amazing songwriter and a singer, and just a terrific guy. And he lives in New York City now. He moved to
Is
New
he
York.
out there still?
Yeah, and he has a place in the village, and he loves it. And he said, "Man, he said this is where I should be." So he's
Wow.
racing New York City,
Mm.
and as long as somebody like that come, and he's inspiring so many people, including a lot of kids who live in New York, to say, maybe I'm going to stay here anyway, and try and do something. And I
My
just enjoy it.
mother-in-law saw him play, oh gosh, a couple months back, maybe within a year or so ago now, but somewhere down in Manhattan. And my wife was telling me, Lisa, she was saying it was just awesome. Such an amazing time. Steve Earle, one of the great songwriters of our
Yeah.
generation.
No, he's terrific, and he and David Brosa, he helped David Brosa, great Israeli singer songwriter, to make a movie called East and West Jerusalem. I just spoke to David yesterday,
Wow.
and he's an incredible musician. And I met him, got to work with him and Townes Van Zandt. I introduced him to Townes years ago, and he's making a recording now of some of the music words that made one already of Townes lyrics that he hadn't written music for, and his wife liked David so much that she had David do that for him.
Wow.
So it's just amazing if you could live your life sort of like an open book, all the terrific people that you can meet.
Mm.
And they don't have to necessarily be well known or be famous at all to be worthwhile. That's the beautiful part. if you're thinking about that, then you wouldn't meet anybody.
That's right. That's
Or
right.
you'd,
You've been looking at the TV all day. Hey, how's it going?
or you'd be spending the time out there with everybody else who's hustling to try to get to
Yeah,
something, to get something,
totally.
and you wouldn't get anything except
Totally.
bad vibes of everybody else.
Yeah.
But I think things come kind of naturally. And I just say that because the best, they do say the best things in life are free, and I honestly think that's true.
Hmm. I agree. You can't buy love. You can't buy happiness. You can't buy peace. You can't buy tolerance. You can't buy respect. This is all
If
stuff.
you could, all of us would save up our money so we could get ourselves something.
Yeah, I'd
And all
save
the
up right now.
people that have more money than they know what to do with would be deliriously happy because they could buy it all.
That's right.
If it was for sale, man, I'm going to buy some myself. So that doesn't mean that it's not good to have some money in the bank. It sure beats being broke, which is a
Yep.
drag.
Yep.
I've been there too. That is a drag
Yep.
and a panic. But
Yep.
above and beyond that, you know, how much do we really need anyway? And the stuff that you can get isn't for sale. I wish it were. I'd try to buy me some of that too. But the wonderful things you can get that are there, you can be aware of. Those are really, and in our culture, we consider, well, if it's a gift, if it's for free, that means it's worthless. Well, with
Yeah.
all due respect, I think very often it's priceless.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. I dig that. That's right. 100%. That's priceless. Listen, what I wanted to say is I'm so glad you zoomed back in because there was just another like 20 minutes of just incredible stories. That was just amazing. Listen, down the road, you already know if maybe we can get you to zoom into a class because what I'm doing now is I'm doing the classes via Zoom. So you could just like how you're doing now, you could zoom in maybe for a half hour with one of my classes down the road. And
Sure.
hey, listen, I I'm so lucky, Dave. Dave, I am so lucky to do what I'm doing. And you are one of the people who told me how lucky you were to have done what you've done. And I look at you as somebody that is a society shaper. And you're one of the greats. And I just want you to realize that, you are what this world needs, and you need to be replicated. And we need to figure this out because what we can infuse into the future based upon what you have learned, what you know, is what can make the future maybe even exponentially even more beautiful in an expedited way. So we can get there quicker and it could be even more beautiful than we ever imagined. And I want to say, your music, your writing, it's two of the vehicles that I'm going to continue to share with everybody I know for many years to come because there's only one David Amram on this planet, and he's right there with us. And we love you, brother. I want you to know that, man. Like, really, I'm a regular person. I'm lucky to be where I am. I'm lucky to have met you. And goodness gracious, you already know if there's anything I could ever be a positive force, I'm there. It seems like you're always the one being more of the positive force. But just know, you have friends here. And if you ever needed anything from us, we're just a quick email, Zoom, phone call.
Right.
Whatever's the easiest way nowadays. And please let your kids know, for those that are in the arts and musicians and artists, if they ever want to be on this talk show, we would love to have them on whenever. So hopefully they watch this and they say, okay, hey, the fella Nick, he's cool, he's all right. Maybe we'll try him out.
I want to say that too. That chair that you're on, that thing in the back of you is great. That the cover
Oh,
for that chair.
oh, I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
My mom made this, Dave.
Beautiful.
This is her quilt.
Wow.
And oh man, she makes quilts. And this is and she has a little tag here. It says made with love on it. And if anybody's interested in getting a quilt, let me know. My mom's been making a lot of quilts and stuff like that during the pandemic, and she does it all by hand. And yeah, she's been doing this for years. Dave, now she's in Pennsylvania with my dad, and she will be so happy to watch this and hear that. Oh, that made me feel real good. Yeah, that's cool. My mom puts her heart into it, and they're so good. They're so comfortable. They're so like cozy. It's the old school stuff. It hasn't been mass produced. It's just, and not to say mass production is terrible, but some of that quality of just the hand knitting, you could
Right.
feel. Oh, hey, listen. We've been on for about 2 hours 35 minutes. We can keep on
So
going. This is how we roll.
if any of the family came from Bari, you can say, like they say there, shamanin.
Shamanin.
That means we got to get going.
Shamanin. David Shamanin. David, brother.
Shamanin.
Shamani.
Yeah.
Shaman with an N at the end or an EE?
With an N.
Shamanin.
Yeah.
Shamanin, Dave. David Amram. Shamanin. We got to go. Listen, we will talk, and I'm going to send you this video, and I'm going to upload it within the next hour and a half. It'll be on our main page of beawoke.com. I'll send you everything. You'll get an email in a couple hours from me, okay? And we'll talk soon.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas and happy holidays. Just quick question. What are you doing for the holidays? Are you having a small gathering or anything? Or
Well, I'm doing mostly. I got my little menorah up. I'm going to give that to my son. Then they're going to celebrate Christmas too, because peace on earth, goodwill to men. Man, who can't get down with that?
That's right.
And everything else, and I'm going to do it mostly. I'm skipping all the dinners because we've been informed by the governor.
Yes.
It's not worth croaking for.
Yes, I've heard
anyway. So I'm probably going to make one of my crock pot nightmare recipes and go online and send everybody a virtual hug.
Right on. I think a lot of people doing that. It's one of those
holiday spirits and survive and look forward to next summer.
100%. That's right, because we just want to make sure we got Amram at 100, the video set. Then we'll do Amram 110, Amram 120, progressively every decade. It's on.
And I want to go back to the Davis Park Fire Department and see if I'm still welcome, since I'm the oldest lifetime fireman there. I got to make sure I can still get in the firehouse.
Hey, listen. I'm telling you, if ever we coordinated paths and I was able to go to Davis Park with you, I bet you there's a couple people there I know. I remember one of the captains of the ferry was a fella that was a captain when I was like 14. Then I went on with my son, Noah. Gosh, I was like 25, so 10 years later, and he's still the captain doing it. So listen, we got to get back there one day. Davis Park is where our paths will cross. Hey, and also on the virtual world, just know today on this Sunday, this was a very special Sunday on December 13th, 2020. David Amram just gave us all an insight into his heart, into his mind, into his spirit. And brother, I can't tell you how grateful we are. We love you, my man. Just want you to know that, brother. Okay. So listen, you have a beautiful day. Enjoy the rest of that Sunday. I know it's about 6:30 something over there on the east. So enjoy the rest of the evening, and we will talk soon. What I'll do is I'll go into a commercial break. Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Amram, episode 148, the Subjective Perspective Show, beawoke.com. The one and only.
Ciao, mi fratello.
Shamin?
No, I said shamanin and ciao, mi fratello.
Yes.
Sono molto contento di essere qui, and all blessed buon Natale and good times for everyone forever.
Shamanin. We'll talk soon, my brother. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go into a musical piece by David Amram, and We're going to sign off, and I'll
Bye.
stop my side right now. Thank you, brother, for everything, Dave. I'm going to stop on my side.